afternoon session, Culture Inclusive Development Policy Assessment. We will have about 15 minutes per each lecture, and we start with François Benamou de la Sorbonne. She is professor at Sorbonne Paris Nord University, president of the Cercle des Économistes, of the Committee on Independence and Pluralism Information, Radio France, and so on and so on. You have the CV in our papers, and she will go through a very important question: why still invest in culture? New perspectives in a context of political crisis. And then it's your floor, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So thank you so much for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here to discuss with you and to be in Roma, of course, the most beautiful city in the world after Paris. Yes. So I must confess, at the very beginning, I wanted to present a paper on philanthropy, because I have published a book on philanthropy and culture. And finally, I decided to change completely and to speak about politics, because I think we face so deep a crisis that we must find answers, and I think that economists must participate in the definition of a new way to live together, etc. So, in order to prepare this paper, I decided to base this paper on two publications. The first one is a book that we published 2 years ago with Hippolyte Dalbis. We edited a book, Economists Answer to Populists. And it's a book on, as you can guess, the question of the future of democracy and the way economists can bring answers to many questions, like the question of identity, of immigration, etc. And the second publication was a report that we made with two other academics, Yann Algan, who is an economist, and Olivier Alexandre, who is a sociologist. And it was a report for the Prime Minister in France about the future of culture after the COVID pandemic. And we raised many questions about, of course, about the migration of consumption and production from physical to virtual consumption and production, of course. But I will not raise this question. I will raise the question of the cultural policies and the money we invest in culture, and is it still very legitimate to invest so much money, public money, in culture in France? So the first point is that, of course, we all know that democracy is at risk, not only in Italy, but in France. Of course, in many countries at the east of Europe, I give some example. For example, with Viktor Orban and his policy for culture, and the way he decides to give an important position in museums, for example, to someone who is rewriting the history of the country. And this is the first example, and it's very difficult to make exhibitions in this country that do not correspond to the idea of Viktor Orban of what should be an exhibition in Hungary at this time. And same question in Poland and in many countries. So this is really a concern for everybody. And you see, we had also many difficulties in France with the well-known yellow jacket protests in 2018, where there. So you see on these images what were how the streets and were transformed for 2 months or maybe a little more. So what can we do and what can we think? And for that, I think that cultural policies are at stake, and I will, as David and others told this morning, many questions. The first question, the more important question for me, is the question of values. There are, with culture, intrinsic value, of course. For example, we want to preserve cultural heritage for cultural heritage and not for other reasons. But we have also many extrinsic values, as the idea that we should restore heritage in order to create economic development. And this kind of value is more and more fragile. I think we have to come back to the real reason why we want to invest in culture. It's for culture. And it's very important to have that in mind, because more and more when you ask for public money, the people in charge of giving you the subsidies, it can be local or not local authorities, they tell you how many employment are you, how many jobs are you going to create, what will be the externalities, etc. And we forget the real reason why we want to invest in culture. It's for culture. Second point, the question of digitization. I will not develop this question. Of course, we have many questions about creation, property rights, artificial intelligence, etc. But we spoke about that this morning, so I dropped this question. And the question of climate and environment. We have to keep in mind that there is a kind of tension in the field of culture between the wish to be green and the impossibility to be green. And I can give you an example that is quite interesting. The Musée du Louvre was in charge to evaluate its carbon, how we say, bilan carbone. Yes, and in this calculation, the worst element is the travel of the people who come to visit the Louvre. So what should we do? Close the door to visitors when they come from too far. So it's very complicated for culture, and I can give many examples that make culture more and more fragile in the scope of the more general public policies. So if I try to go further, many people, as I said before, in the field of culture, in the field of cultural policies, etc., put forward the positive externalities of culture. Okay, yes, there are positive externalities. All of you know that, but we can discuss this question. For example, we have many papers and many questions around tourism. Tourism, of course. Culture, thanks to culture, tourism is very important. For example, in France, it represents about 7% of the national product, but there is all the question of gentrification, of over-tourism, etc. And the cost, finally, the cost of tourism are very high, and there are many examples. You try to find a new way to create revenues and new resources thanks to culture, but you have to keep in mind that, yes, you create positive externalities, but you create also negative externalities, and the count is not always in favor of culture, except if you consider that culture is important for democracy and for people, etc. And in order to verify this question, we made a study for the Conseil d'analyse économique about the relation between culture and well-being. And our question was, okay, there are positive externalities, but what is the effect of culture on well-being, on people well-being? And for that, we had we collected many data on the degree of satisfaction and the trust, interpersonal trust for people. And there are many data that are published by INSEE every year. And we had also many data about the investment of local authorities in culture. And our objective was to try to make a link, a statistical link, between local cultural spending, cultural practices, and satisfaction in life, well-being. And what is interesting is that we had, so I have, how many time? No, it's okay. So we collected the data about the number of festivals, of heritage sites, of performing art theaters, etc. in France, in very small cities, in rural territories, in small cities, then in suburbs, then in middle-sized cities, and in big cities. And you see the difference in culture in all these cities. And then we studied the public money invested in each of these categories. So I go very quickly. And our issues are important. We were able to show that there is a strong relationship between people's cultural practices and their satisfaction. And even with one cultural activity in the year compared with no activity, there is a change in the answers to the different polls about the satisfaction, about the trust in the society, etc., of people. And it was even the equivalent for of an amount of money, of revenues for the people. And living in a municipality that spends more on culture increases finally the probability for an inhabitant to have cultural practices, of course, but also to favor well-being and the ability to speak, for people to speak together, etc. And the second study is this one, is to try to make a relationship between culture and citizenship. And we studied for different municipalities the issues of the election of the Président de la République in France, and also two elections, municipal election at the local level elections, 2 different years. And what we observed with, of course, many data, and is that if you have two comparable cities, small cities, and in one of the two cities there is a big effort in investment in culture, the level of abstention diminishes. For 100 euros, more euros by inhabitant for a year, you observe that abstentions diminishes 1%. We don't know what did people for whom they voted. And that was not our problem. Our idea was to measure citizenship, and when we presented that to the people who worked with the President de la République, and they told us, "Well, 1%." I don't think it's negligible. Of course, 1% it's very low. And it's not because you spend 100 euros more that you have 1% lower abstention. If you send 200 euros, you will not have, I don't know, 2% abstention lower. That's not the problem. But even 1%, it's important, because we have really a crisis of belief in the future of democracy. So it's important to take all these questions in consideration when we think of a new way to conduct a cultural policy. So my concluding remarks, yes. I think we must think cultural policies without thinking them in a silo, in a kind of silo, thinking exclusively to actors, to people who are involved in culture. At this time, culture has to widen, to enlarge its way of thinking, and to take in consideration health, social consideration, political considerations, etc. My second point is that we have, all of you, I see young people, we have so strong responsibilities in order to reinforce the ability of populations to live together. And a way to reinforce this ability to live together is to convince people who are in charge of the more general policy that culture is important for life, for well-being, for people not to be too much isolated. Because was one of the reasons why we had the yellow jackets protests was the isolation of people. People don't speak to nobody. Some people, especially women in rural territories. My third point is that spillover effects and externalities and positive externalities are important, okay, but we must not focus on them in order to define the right cultural policy. And my last point is that we have to pay attention to inequalities, because when you see these differences in cultural spending for the population, you see one of the roots, one of the reasons why the inequalities in education and in well-being are so high. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And sorry for my English. I woke up at 4 o'clock. So.
No, it was perfect, and really interesting, this connection with democracy, when policies, well-being, peace. You wrote something about peace.
Peace.
I don't know if there are any questions about this very interesting.
The paper is published and it's free of. You can find it.
Yeah. No, not for me, but
Please.
No, just a footnote. We did a study in 1978 or 9 in the city of Bremen, which came to the exact conclusions than in your case with the city citizenship participation actually corresponds to the cultural vitality of the city, you know, and exactly the same result.
Please send me the references.
Okay, very, very interesting. Then we can go to the second, Maria Chiara Esposito from European Commission. Title is The Cultural Dimension of Sustainable Development, European Perspective, about the EU policies and the wider transformation process that will be taken. Thank you very much. Please.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me? Yes. Thanks a lot for this invitation. It's really a timely participation for me. I represent the DG Education and Culture, and in particular the Cultural Policy Unit at the European Commission. I don't know to what extent you are familiar with the role of the Commission in cultural policies and in the efforts about stressing how culture has been increasingly relevant to the different aspects of sustainable development. But I think that the first step for me is really to tie with the last presentation that we heard, and also with many of the topics that were discussed this morning, to stress, first of all, that many of these, let's say, understandings and awareness about the importance of culture for well-being, for social cohesion, for the intrinsic capacity of society to live a better quality of life are very much at the attention of European strategies already since many years. At the same time, I would like to stress that at the European level, there is no direct competence, no legislative and no, let's say, financial direct power for intervention of culture. So this needs to be taken into account when we look at the European perspective, to also understand how big and how important is to see that the power of the EU to facilitate the upscale of the role of culture in other policies is even more important because of this lack of competence. So whatever is done in a condition where we can only support cooperation and support the programs and interventions and efforts that member states, universities, ecosystems at regional level in the different countries develop between them and within each of them. So this is for me already the main point for understanding the context in which we are discussing. Having said this, I would like really to point to the main developments over the past years, where the role of culture has been put at the attention of policymakers under the other priorities. So if it's true that, of course, the externalities should not be the only ones guiding the discourse, we also have to be very realistic that in order to have a better integration of culture into other policy sectors, we need this effort of mainstreaming culture in other policy areas, because this is the only way to remind other policymakers in industry, economic policies, environmental policies, how the intrinsic value of culture is beneficial, to society through many angles. And this is exactly what has been happening through showcasing the importance of culture for sustainable development and for the green transition. Our main framework that you can see in this slide is the work plan for culture, which is essentially a set of guiding principles and priorities that are established at the level of the Council, which represent the member states in the EU, for the Commission to implement these actions of pushing for cooperation and for integrating culture in different policy priorities. And you can see that green transition, culture for the planet, culture for the people, with a strong attention to climate action, quality of environment, importance of heritage against the, and its resilience against disasters, are the key priorities for our activities on culture by the Commission. And I also want to recall, I didn't put it in the slide, but another very important framework is the new European Agenda for Culture, which was established in 2018, which was also the European Year for Cultural Heritage, where all these connections with social cohesion, well-being, and the power of the EU society through culture, also in the international scenario, were recalled. So these frameworks are really very, very important. And our methods of work are indeed to let experts and representatives from the national authorities and groups that are advocating and working on culture in the different member states cooperate together to let advance recommendations and policy actions in the field. So the so-called open method of coordination is a specific kind of instrument that we support in the Commission, creating these working groups of member states experts that address a specific policy subject in the field of culture. And in the last 2 years, we had 2 of these groups that were working on the issue of culture and sustainable development on one side, and on the issue of culture for climate change on the other. In particular, I will focus on the recent reports of this group on the cultural dimension of sustainable development, which you can see in the physical existence, which is, of course, available online, entitled Stormy Times, Nature and Humans, Cultural Courage for Change, which produced a number of alarming recommendations and messages to showcase, also from a scientific point of view, many of the things that the projects discussed here today have been reiterating. So even concerning the transformative power of culture on economic, social, and environmental dimensions of sustainable development, but also how it's important to think that the increasing knowledge about culture impact on sustainable development through all the indicators and measurement mechanisms that many research projects have been doing are better known and understood, but are not enough because they are very fragmented. So they're not sufficient as long as they are fragmented to push the policymakers to go beyond the current situation of SDGs, and this initiative of Mondia Cult, where all the parties agreed on a declaration for culture as a global public good, was also a way to create a strong momentum for a demand for a cultural dedicated goal in the agenda post-2030. And this report really starts from the assumption that also at the level of the international mechanisms, there are too many fragmentations in the way each country and even within the different, let's say, parties of the national authorities that that tell a good story about culture for sustainable development, this amount of richness of data is not guiding in the right way the decisions for sustainability strategies. So there is a need to better integrate this amount of information and to not only be considered as examples or case studies, but also to be used to do larger and more relevant policies where investments are done for cultural professionals to be connected to the development policies for environment, for sustainability, for social inclusion. So the main recommendation of this report was indeed to consider the different drivers that exist in all the systems, in all the pathways for sustainability across policy fields, from the economic system, the food system, the energy and the urban system, where the so-called global environmental commons can leverage culture to be used towards well-being and capabilities. This was an analysis based on a report of the International Panel for Climate Change that explained how essentially all the ways in which society uses the environmental resources to produce well-being and capability for a good connection between humans and nature use cultural methods and cultural instruments. So this is really a way to kind of prove how culture is present in all these transformations pathways. And these are the cultural concepts that correspond to these areas of transformation. And this report really suggests ways to use these cultural instruments to develop, for example, cultures of sharing and trust, to change habits in behaviors or food production, to reinforce the capacity of cooperation between those authorities that have an impact on producing a better capacity of being a citizen in nowadays society, and also to develop human well-being in balance with natural resources. You see here, I can of course also make my slides available for a deeper analysis, but just the keywords show how these messages were targeting all those that are involved in this discussion about sustainable development, also in the big meeting settings like the G20, like the future of Mondial Cult, like the UN. So the idea is really to continue to leverage this push for culture driving transformations and a capacity of changing behaviors, and also to be considered as an underused power, and this underused power is shown as a threat because there are also a number of data about the missing targets of sustainable developments due to the insufficient use of the cultural power. And here you can also see some other conclusions from the other group I mentioned before on how to strengthen cultural heritage resilience for climate change. Again, not only as a way to protect cultural heritage, which is of course an asset that needs to be saved, guarded, and supported and enhanced in itself and for itself, but also as a way to drive better climate action, because many of the gaps in cultural policies show that better research, more cooperation, and more investment in cultural heritage would also increase the capacity of societies to tackle climate change. And again, here there are recommendations that have been widespread in many events, including beyond Europe, to decision makers to take into account, in particular in the field of research and research programs, all these best practices and suggestions to use cultural heritage assets and sites as examples where an investment for tackling climate change can be developed. One other recent important work that we have produced is a so-called structured dialogue with civil society, which is also a way for us at the Commission to interact with organizations that connect museums, cultural heritage institutions, creative industries. So all representatives from these areas gather in a group which is called Voices of Culture, and the Commission supports the discussion between these experts, and they are also entitled to give recommendations and a report that informs the institutions. And the innovative way of this last Voices of Culture group, which was at the basis of stimulating the debate on the importance of greening the cultural and creative sector, also proved the importance of creativity in looking at the circular role of culture, because these recommendations took into consideration on one side the power of culture for the green transition, so similarly to what I presented so far, but on the other side they also made very practical suggestions about how to fund programs that can use culture as a model for sustainability in other sectors. So really turning the discourse around. And the last initiative that I want to mention, which is very specific to the research world, is an ongoing project that the Horizon Europe Research and Innovation Program, which is the most important program for research intervention at European level, which has a strong component investing on climate change, has been consulting society for launching a new partnership about cultural heritage, and climate change is considered the most important challenge for the New Year's funding. Linked to this, there is an ongoing proposal that is being considered at the European level between the Commission and the Member States authorities to launch a big funding which will be co-designed and co-organized between research and cultural ministries of Member States together with the Commission to create a platform, to create a so-called partnership where essentially money will be put together to have a convergent strategy to invest in cultural heritage research directed to climate change objectives. And the idea is to call this partnership Resilient Cultural Heritage Partnership, where the main target would be tangible cultural heritage, but the idea is also to have a holistic approach to cultural heritage where, for example, cultural landscapes, intangible assets, different kinds of heritage can be taken into account in the research questions and in investments, but targeting in particular those disciplines that are proving to be very promising and revolutionary for the contribution of cultural heritage to climate change, and also to strengthen the scientific outcomes and capacity of informing the policies and the connection between climate research and cultural heritage objectives and strategies. A final reference to this initiative, which is called the New European Bauhaus, and is probably something you might have heard about in different settings. It's also a cultural movement which was launched by President von der Leyen 2 years ago to create connections between different fundings and programs inspired by the original historical vision of the Bauhaus movement, but translated and actualized into the Green Deal goals. So it's really inspired by the Green Deal objectives to become more tangible and concrete through a cultural soul. So the idea is to make available line of funding in different EU programs that can have an impact at the level of places, at the level of innovation on the ground, so enable enabling environment for innovation through cultural and artistic collaborations, and as I said before, facilitating behaviors and lifestyles inspired by this vision of 3 principles, where sustainability, inclusiveness, and aesthetics, that are components particularly relevant to the cultural sector's capacity to influence society, will be used for regeneration of spaces and better quality of living through this, let's say, narrative that the European Union has been developing in cooperation with many also national and regional authorities that are translating this movement into practice. And you will see that Horizon Europe has an increasing number of calls that will target the new European Bauhaus. This is an open call where researchers, architecture experts, architects, designers, and cultural professionals can submit project proposals. This call is open until February next year, where research is developed in an experimental way, where cultural actors collaborate with academic institutions to use cultural heritage targeting spaces and green objectives for the values of the new European Bauhaus to be realized through research projects that invest in the value of culture and in cultural practices. And this is really complementary to the work for culture and sustainable development that we have been promoting over these last years.
Thank you very much. If someone, are there questions, please? C'è un microfonino volante.
The European Union hasn't got direct legislative power. What is the policy of historical reading? And are there any issues towards minimum harmonization? Is there any?
Intelligence enough.
I'm digital divide. I mean, is there any issue towards a minimum harmonization in cultural heritage legislation in European Union? And if not, is that because it is perceived like member states' prerogative? So it's not, I mean, European competence.
Yes, essentially in the question, there is already part of the solution of the answer, which is the intrinsic, let's say, aspect of the whole European law, I would say. So I would need to summarize a whole university background to answer properly this question, but specifically to culture, of course, it's the so-called subsidiarity principle that is valid. So it's a prerogative of national authorities to decide how to manage, to intervene and legislate on cultural heritage. Let's say that, of course, there are a number of fields in which cooperation and support from the European Union have been able to advance the capacity of having some sort of, I wouldn't say harmonization, but of coordination. So, for example, the research the research program is where this is happening because there is a push towards similar approaches. But when it comes, for example, to tackle a specific policy for the local or the national way of managing cultural heritage, there the European Union cannot intervene. On the artistic and for example, educational skills side, of course, there are cross-cutting aspects between culture and other fields, including education, where the Commission can promote more actions and support also more harmonization when it comes to skills, for example. And also there is an ongoing discussion, which is very important for the cultural sector, on the working conditions of artists and cultural professionals.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Please, another question?
Yeah. So, an aged one. Question on the power of culture to empower people towards climate action. There is little evidence of this impact. I mean, the impact of culture to empower people for climate action. And I know that the NEB Lab is working on this. Can you tell us something more? And also, there was maybe the possibility of the European Bauhaus to be the 6th mission of Horizon Europe, and this failed. Or I know it is maybe going to fail, and why it is a missed opportunity.
So I will start from this last point, which is the most delicate. On this, the Commission cannot give any statement because it's really a matter of cooperation with member states, which are those in charge of deciding if a mission will happen or not. In any case, the outcome of that discussion will be relevant because, of course, there is an interest in the new European Bauhaus, both within Horizon Europe and in the other programs. So it will remain, of course, an important priority. But we cannot foresee and we cannot say anything about the mission in particular. But what is important also to think that the new European Bauhaus is very connected to culture and to empowering people in many ways. Also, that the Commission has tried to kind of split somehow between programs. For example, there have been Bauhaus-oriented calls, also linked to the planning of cohesion policies or for supporting local authorities with technical assistance in using the European structural funds, also with the view to the new European Bauhaus principles. The same is true for Creative Europe, which is the other specific program targeting the cultural sector. It's not a big program in terms of budget. It's not a huge, let's say, investment for research, but it's more for cultural cooperation. And there, for example, we have created a new pilot initiative that then became stabilized in Creative Europe, which is called Culture Moves Europe. It's for mobility of artists, architects, cultural professionals, cultural heritage managers, all kind of cultural workers that want to go on a residency in other countries through this funding.
Thank
so
you very
there
much.
are instruments.
We thought to change a bit program because we are a bit late. If Andreas Wiesan could be your turn, and then the other two that you have similar topics with Michaela will be the last ones. Please, Andreas Wiesan, the Executive Director, European Institute for Comparative Cultural Research, and so on. He speaks about culture shaped our research, or could it be the other way around? The constructing 5 decades of the FKF research experience. Please. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for invitation. And this will be a bit more different presentation. Maybe I can have this beautiful. Did you find it? Anyway, and it will also be partly more personal. I'm not an economist, so it can be different. I hope you don't mind. Pietro actually gave permission to this format. So yeah, the Center for Cultural Research, or in German Zentrum für Kulturforschung, and it's abbreviated ZFKF, were part of the German magazine Der Spiegel, maybe you've heard of it, and then have changed its name all the time, but I will use this above name first because it is easier and will not confuse you too much. So since its formation, the ZFKF since its formation, developed a research profile I cannot really go into all this profile and the governance and the partners and the financing and the staff and main projects and publications. It's not possible in 20 minutes. So I will focus on these issues here. You can see the basics, evaluation and transfer of the archives. Actually, that's the reason why I'm here, because I'm doing this since June last year. It's not easy. Many hundred boxes full of archives. Experience feasibility, and so you see what this will be about. To begin with, in the 1970s, the ZFKF developed its interdisciplinary research, documentation, and advisory activities in various sectors of the arts, heritage, media, and into an independent field of work that aimed to provide, and that's the main reason why we were there, transparency through evidence for policymaking addressing the wider field of culture. And this differs clearly, let me emphasize, from research on political culture, on the one hand, and also from the now popular academic cultural studies. Specialties of the Institute's work had been empirical surveys on the professional, legal, and social situation and qualification of arts, heritage, and media workers. Development of training and further education concepts and their evaluation, including, for example, in cultural management or influences of new technologies. Comparative studies on culture and media policies in Germany and Europe. Empirical user research via surveys. We were always doing many surveys. Studies and consultancy projects on cultural infrastructures and the development of cultural economy at international, national, and also on regional levels. And basic research in cultural anthropology and its dissemination, which included also a focus on development policy issues and the so-called North-South dialogue. As far as partners in governance of the ZFKF are concerned, let me summarize that in the fall of 1972, the former Institute for Project Studien of der Spiegel was transferred into a project-oriented research partnership management by Carla Vorbeck and myself on a freelance basis since 1979 under the name Center for Cultural Research. Well, it may be encouraging for some of you that this photo, I was not even 30 years old and I didn't have a PhD, but did already huge studies that made its way. So please go ahead. Thanks to her extensive sociological and cultural anthropology training, including in Frankfurt, London, and Paris, Carla Vorbeck in particular was able to contribute a great deal of theoretical knowledge to the work of the ZFKF and at the same time to the structuring of the archive. I tried to complement this potential by focusing more on culture, media, and educational policy issues. In 1989, when Carla Vorbeck was elected Cultural Commissioner of the city of Nuremberg, the ZFKF had to be transformed, and it was then a limited liability company with a special statute, at least mainly at the suggestion of the Federal Ministry of Education and Science, which became then our main sponsor during the 1990s. The new GmbH contract of the ZFKF was certainly unique in German company law because it provided for a non-profit trust fund with a blocking minority for shareholders from the state, municipalities, associations, and international professional organizations. The Board of Trustees could intervene in fundamental issues, investment questions, and so on. Today, this company still exists under the new name Arcold Media, but focuses more on development of publications and on advisory services. And now let's turn to the ZFCAF archives. I called this chapter Diving into the Reality in the Absence of Internet. Well, let's not forget when we started 1970, 72, being independent, no internet, no Google. So we all had to collect it ourselves, what we needed for the research. And now this is being dissolved. So to show my successful work, I show the next picture. Same seller. So something happened, as you can see. And well, what's left will be taken over by the institution, the German state institution collecting documentary evidence on contemporary German history, the Institut für Zeitgeschichte. Well, it has not been an easy task during these last 1.5 years. After their work for Der Spiegel ended, Carla Vorbeck and myself had set up this special archive as a source of information for conducting our freelance research projects. At the end of 1989, this partnership ended, and the documentation was continued under the name Archive for Cultural Policy, under my sole responsibility. Due to its unique position in Germany, the ZFKF documentation was not only available to the Institute and its clients, but also to the wider, mostly academic public. This open house policy had been expressly stipulated in the Institute's statutes. A few words the size and scope of our concerning the scope and size of our archives, which had grown considerably over the years. At the end of the 1980s, it already filled a whole house. And a few later, the holdings comprised many hundred document folders and around 16,000 publications, books, and so on, a lot of gray literature. With several thousand subject categories, the documentation enabled an initial orientation in terms of content during the planning and the start of new projects. We managed over 300 projects. The stock was later supplemented then as the projects progressed. Facts and statistics were sometimes also transferred to databases, for example, for the Handbook of Cultural Awards. Since the main aim of the ZFK was to enable more transparency for cultural-related policy making, our documentation had to deliver mainly empirical information. Unexpectedly, this contributed to its political significance. At a time when cultural policy in Germany was still seen primarily as a matter for the states, the Länder, the federal states, or as an instrument for city profiling via large public arts institutions, the archive helped us to gradually develop a more holistic perspective. In addition to state or municipal actors in cultural policy, arts institutes, artistic professionals, associations, trade unions, media of all kinds, the economy, science, and activities in civil society were included in the collections. However, in comparison with public archives, its disadvantages also became gradually visible, as you could imagine, because professional support and the much needed further developments, including new technical facilities, could not be financed by the research, freelance research income alone. Institutional solutions for the holdings in Germany did not work out. We were not in France, where such things are handled by a special institution of the Ministère de la Culture. So in the end, we had to put many things of this beautiful documentation into archive cellars. But on the other hand, we also made an active partnership with the newly founded European Institute for Comparative Cultural Research, Eric Arts Institute, which now, however, comes to an end. The original founders of the Institute, in particular Spiegel publisher Rudolf Augstein had something like a German think tank along the American model in mind. The so-called Hudson Institute, you may have heard of that one, as we were told in autumn, and which I could now also verify in my review of the archives. But shortly after, rumors of the apparent CIA stakes in such think tanks made them suddenly seem less attractive. And already in 1970, when the first projects began, it became apparent that the staff had somewhat different motives and ideas. Since practically everyone among us had a cultural background, the first director, like myself, came from the Rowohlt publishing house, the choice of a work focus in the broader area of culture and media became soon obvious. Only 2.5 years later, for reasons of cost, the Spiegel had introduced staff participation, and perhaps also because our intention to place results of our works into the magazine, something journalists don't always appreciate, we broke away from Der Spiegel. And we took over the Institute at full personal risk in the mistaken expectation of a partnership law in the near future. But not only in Italy, many provisional arrangements are known to be tougher than originally thought. A SWOT analysis, had it been common practice in those founding years, would have confirmed the gap in the market for empirical research in the arts and media, especially for culture policy. This field of activity, in a sense, the realities of culture, was hardly cultivated in Germany in the last 90 years, and the efforts of cultural sociologists of the Weimar period were not consistently developed after the disappearance of the Nazi dictatorship, which also influenced the way the arts and heritage were dealt with in the press. Of course, many special academic disciplines exist, art history, musicology, whatever, but at least at that time, empirical approaches and an interest in the conditions of current cultural production and dissemination and related policies was extremely rare, apart from the Cologne School of René König and Alfons Silbermann. In other fields of empirical research, I only need mention cultural and social anthropology in the Anglophone and Francophone countries. The German state of the art was even lower than in the 1920s. In addition, a German tradition has always been to locate culture in what is called a superstructure, or to bury it there. Karl Marx sends his regards. During the 1970s, empirical research in the cultural sphere as a basis for systematically conceived policy was pursued, especially in France, in connection with the planification cultivated there. Incidentally, this was not introduced by sociologists. André Malraux, the first French Minister of Culture, made sure that culture was included in the major economic and socio-political 5-year plans, and for this purpose, a number of experts were recruited in the Ministry of Culture in a new Service des Recherches et Études around Augustin Girard. In this respect, the newly founded ZFKF and the Paris government department had similar goals. However, at first, we knew nothing about each other's work. In Austria, colleagues were a bit more thinking ahead and more internationally thinking ahead at that time, and founded, with the decisive participation of Kurt Blaukopf, an institute that cooperated closely with UNESCO and universities, later called Mediacult. I joined its board in 2002. In Germany, such a model was hardly conceivable in these days, since culture was rather considered in national and also Bush League terms, while all around the real existing media culture had long since been internationalized, or rather Americanized, which prompted many educated citizens and scholars, even Theodor Adorno, to escape all the more into the corner of superseding spiritualization. I will go on with our flagship projects. The new institute presented its flagships as early as 1972, while it was still part of the Spiegel, but in the end already on the road towards independence. The Autoren report was a large-scale study on the situation of writers and other freelance literary and journalistic workers in the culture and media business. I will skip something. Anyway, we conducted oral interviews of over an hour's duration with a total of 1,700 authors, and afterwards had a fairly good overview on their professional and socio-economic situation. An analysis of about 1,400 authors' contracts and many other surveys contributed to this. The resulting authors report was one of the most controversial book publications at the time. Rudolf Ackstein, the publisher of Der Spiegel, wrote in its foreword to the Autoren report, more, and I quote, "More has been written about this authors report before it appeared than about any other book before it appeared, and possibly even more than is written about most books after they appeared on the market." Indeed, the response was huge and by no means only positive at first. The author's report shook up still rather traditional professional images of art and literature critics, and also the self-image of some literary authors, which often still resembled the poor poet from the 18th century. The fact that writers had long since gone multimedia or had to seek compensation in radio, the press, film, at readings, for example, partly because of low book revenues, had hardly been addressed until then. Nevertheless, despite initial controversies surrounding the author's report, its positive after effects continued to this day because important cultural policy changes emerged as a result. The author's report, as well as the artist's report following, provided blueprints and above all decisive empirical foundations for the Artist Social Insurance Act a few years later. An achievement for freelancers in the arts and media sector that is still unique worldwide, even if it did not meet all our expectations. The fact that many self-employed in the professional field work rather employee-like, we call this Arbeitnehmerähnlich, similar to workers, and in any case hardly entrepreneurial, also led to new legal action by the federal parliament. The situation of creative workers was now publicly addressed, and since many of the relevant organizations, associations contributed to the preparation of the report, we had first steps toward a German Arts Council, which later was founded. Well, let's skip it. Second inquiry, published in 1975 as the Artist's Report, the Künstler Report for the German government, was organized in a similar manner, but this time we interviewed 3,000 artists. Today, this form of empirical research might be difficult to organize, I have to warn you, because new data protection regulations could prevent what we did for systematic, very complex survey of addresses. For example, and I just named this example, the addresses of all journalistic or artistic freelancers of the broadcasting companies in Germany, we have 11 of them, which amounted to 70,000 addresses, were collected. And so we could develop a real nice sample, a truly independent sample. And good. After the initial reports on the professional situation of authors and artists, the Institute studies and activities continued for a decade to revolve about this, but then also progress, and I will show you later in what direction. I will skip some of the working principles of the Institute, which were actually supposed to be done, but I will tell you there were two main aspects played a role. First, what we call differentiation of interests. One must never see people and their institution as interest-free and will-less objects of benevolent research. So we never used the word target group for our research. And second, and that's important and is shown here also on the picture, action-orientated. We had to conduct research in a different manner and fill knowledge gap by cooperation and collaboration. And sometimes had to find unconventional methods for research. Like you see here in this picture, this was a question, or we were asked by UNESCO in Paris that what they had been launched, so-called Florence Agreement, did not work as planned. Yeah? There were complaints by artists because this was supposed to enable a hassle-free transport of works of art across frontiers by their creators. And UNESCO did not have documentary evidence of the problems, what was really the problem. And so in this case, I decided to, to disguise myself as a bohemian artist, as you can see here. I even painted the pictures by hand because I didn't want to lie in front of officials. And then I crossed 13 frontiers, hoping to collect and copy, and indeed I did, appropriate documents. You see one on the right side. This is a very interesting one because it shows that in Switzerland, they calculated the amount of duties I had to pay, 300 francs, by the weight of the pictures. You know? So this was a really remarkable exercise. In our case, one project followed the other because the over 100 clients and study partners wanted new, fresh food for thought, and rather those affected as both clients and those who had been switched from so-called target groups wanted to become actors doing research. In these days, we did not have such nice terms like participative governance, but indeed it was something in that line which we try to foster, and we also contribute to the or even run the associations with a longer perspective, like the Society for Cultural Policy or the German Arts Council. Okay, I will skip the chapter of complementary relations in the European scene because we simply don't have time. I was told I was allowed to speak 25 minutes now. I'm not allowed anymore, so I'm sorry. I have
can you go to conclusions?
Doesn't matter. I come to my conclusions, well, there's one missing. Well, okay, we used the wrong one. It doesn't matter. I'm of the opinion that Europeanization or globalization does not necessarily need to result in uniform cultural consequences. And I actually believe that diversity is a lifeline for European cultures, and the simple motto, bird's eye view beats frog's perspective, is an erroneous or ambivalent conclusion. Economists would probably say, think global, act local. I don't believe that. This motivated Carla Forberg and me 40 years ago to write a popular cultural anthropology, which I wanted to show you the title of, but which has somehow disappeared from these slides. We wanted to show that here in Europe, we are at least as believing in magical practices than anywhere in Africa or elsewhere. Okay, here I have finally the overview of what came out of my archive reviews, and you see certain contextual focal points emerge. I'm wondering just whether in research done by people around here or other research institutions, this scheme, this development of main topics had a similar road, you know. In our case, as you can see, status artists, development policies, cultural participation, internationalization, economics, gender issues, arts administration, new technologies, arts education, and finally cultural rights. This may have been very specific. It's just my personal interest to learn from you more about your experience and whether in your countries or institutes this went differently. And let me close finally with agreeing with Françoise Benamou that I'm also worried about the changes and dangers democracy is facing at the moment in Europe, the many instances of censorship and also, and maybe even more important, of self-censorships, which can undermine our way of life. So let's hope the worst is not to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very nice experience. I will give now the floor to Patrizia Riganti, University of Glasgow, full professor in tourism at the University of Glasgow, architect, urban planner, and culture economist. She will talk about the valuing cultural capital in support of decision making. Thank you very much. Please. We will, yes, sure. Ask. Okay. Proposal to measure. Here we are.
No,
it's not.
The right.
Culture. I think it's that one. No, yes. That's me.
Okay.
Oh, disappeared. The title disappeared. Let's hope that not the whole one disappeared. Yeah, let's try to go. Oh, okay. There's just that's my name disappeared, but you heard that. Can we put full screen? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So, thank you very much for having me here. And this is the outline of my talk. I will talk obviously of the experience that we are happening in the UK and to what extent I'm involved. Oh, thank you. This disappeared the voice, disappeared the slide. Okay, might be a sign. So I will touch on a few things that link to all that has been said, but obviously particularly to the keynote speech that David Crosby has presented this morning. The focus here, the title that disappeared was Valuing Culture Capital in support of decision making. Why do we value and what do we value? The argument that we are debating in policy making at UK level is we need to value, we need to articulate this value in a way that is useful for decision makers. So I will touch upon that and what are the implications also in terms of research, academic research. When we talk about cultural capital, the definition itself combine the concept of culture and economic values. It's not the definition of cultural capital is different. It's from economic perspective, as David was saying. So it's different from a culture perspective. So we talk about historic values that inform the economic value of an historic asset. Basically, we are saying that cultural asset, when we think of physical one, like architectural assets, have an economic value that goes beyond the real estate value. So this is crucial to understand why cultural capital goods are different from other goods. They do have a real estate value, but their value goes over that. But this is not captured in the way we traditionally assess this value. The whole debate on the economic valuation of cultural capital has speared off once this has started for natural capital. Environmental economists have started this debate. How do we value things that are out of the market, and what do we value? We have been talking in the 80s and the 90s about total economic value of environmental assets. For those of you who have a relation with environmental economists might remember that debate. So total economic value means that we consider both the use value and the non-use value of these goods. And this is a publication that we did many years ago with Peter Nijkamp, trying to summarize at that moment, 2009, I think, how use value and non-use values can be captured, can be articulated in different aspects. But basically can be captured by certain techniques. Some techniques look at what are the traces that consumers have on the market, and those are the so-called revealed preferences techniques, while others look at what people state would be their willingness to pay. For instance, to preserve a church, an asset, a complex historic asset. And this is very important. In the early 1990s, this debate was going on, as I said, in environmental economics, and a number of techniques have been developed in those years for the assessment of values of what we call public goods. And stated preferences were quite new towards the end of the 1980s, and very few application to cultural capital until, I would say, mid-1990s. The first application of contingent valuation, which is one of these techniques, was done by David in 1989. I think that my application in 1994, just out of my master's degree at UCL with David Pierce, was actually the first application of contingent valuation to an archaeological site, which is a complex site. So we had to, in academia, to debate and develop a lot how can we value. But this approach was a bit this approach was a bit disorganized, let's say, was an ad hoc approach. Every researcher started being interested. Well, few researchers. For many decades, we were very few who were applying these techniques to different aspects of cultural capital. A book was published in 2002 by Navrud and Brady on the valuation of cultural heritage using stated preferences. So initially it was quite a slow intake. Why am I saying that? Because in recent years, in the last couple of years, this, at least at the UK level, has changed dramatically. And for decades, we were few people who were interested in this, and we were talking to each other, but nothing was impacting, seems to really impact decision making. And this has changed in 2021 when the Department of Culture, Media and Sport in the UK has published a framework that David was mentioning before, a cultural heritage and capital framework for the valuation of cultural assets. Why is that? I will explain a bit more. It doesn't come out of nowhere. It's been the work, particularly due to the dedication of the head economist for culture and tourism at the CMS, who has been interested on the valuation and application of various market and non-market techniques to cultural capital for more than 10 years. But he came back to the CMS, I think, in 2016, and decided to give it a push. And last year, we did, with partnership with ICROM, a workshop exactly on this. How can we account for the hidden value of a heritage? This workshop was done in cooperation with the Department of Culture, Media and Sport. You can see the guy I mentioned is on the right. Historic England, and Alison Heritage is in the middle as the key person in ICROM, who is looking at this element. And then you can see David, who is the theoretical reference for the Department of Culture, Media and Sport. And what is happening is the department is trying to develop through research more formally this approach to see how the valuation of cultural heritage can effectively be managed in support of decision making. Yeah. I have to say before, so there are a number of things that have happened, and I will mention in a bit more. But in research, we have been doing, using these techniques, as I was saying, for quite some decades, but in a sparse manner, particularly just in the last few years, just before COVID, I was awarded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council a study that was looking at the value of marine cultural capital in Mozambique. Under the understanding that this heritage is very important for the local population, that is based, it drives a lot of tourism, but there is no clear awareness about the value, and especially there is no clear awareness to decision making or how people feel a benefit by the presence of this heritage. And the whole idea of the project is how can we develop a more inclusive development, basing it on the awareness that local decision maker and local population develop through also the use of certain techniques to articulate this value, to show that even in techniques like the one that are used at the UK level, like social cost benefit analysis, we know the cost of investing in the protection of heritage, but we can fully articulate the benefits that so far are not articulated. That's what has also pushed the Department of Culture, Media and Sport in developing this framework, because it's the benefit that we need to articulate. And the Treasury in the UK allows, assess business cases for investment on the basis of social benefit analysis, but still the benefits of the presence of heritage are not accounted. So before everything was developed, was one of my last projects before all this was happening in the UK. I've done several projects using these techniques, but it's interesting to see the timing. This was also in partnership with UNESCO, and we were looking at this maritime heritage that is also under threat by looting particularly, and how we could understand the value that the different stakeholders were attaching to this fantastic underwater ecosystem. We realized, we were talking about the key element of this marine heritage are shipwrecks from the Portuguese colonial period. That actually locally is seen very positively. Sometimes colonial heritage has got a negative, like in India, a negative conception, but in this case people identify very well, but especially they understand that this brings tourism, that tourism brings wealth, and actually they also understand, to our surprise, how important is the presence of this shipwreck for the flora and the fauna. That was very interesting to discover on the field, that they perceive this as a continuum, as an ecosystem, a cultural and natural capital continuum. So we could approach this from a blue economy perspective, looking at different stakeholders that represented the tourism, fishery, obviously also transportation. And this project will feed very much into another project that I'm co-investigating, that is led by the University of Glasgow, that is a transcontinental funded project on adaptation and remediation post-COVID strategy that have been developed post-COVID in Scotland, Germany, Costa Rica, and Massachusetts. So we are using in both the project the only technique that is available to value possible future scenarios, or in the COAST project about remedial action based on tourism and on the presence of local heritage. And in this case, directly valuing how important this heritage was for the different stakeholders, like fishermen, residents, tourists, tour operators, construction companies. So we designed what is called a discrete choice experiment that is a bit the fancy evolution of contingent valuation, where we do not ask directly people to tell us their willingness to pay for a program, but we actually show a combination options, we call them as in here, a combination of attributes, their level, and a cost to the program. And even in Mozambique, where the level of literacy is very low, we had a great success in collecting the information, and we had obviously another proof that these techniques actually, if well designed and conducted, can really not just give a number, but measure the marginal utility of respondents per each of these attributes. However, this is not so easy. Yes, some of us are quite experienced in developing questionnaire, implementing this service, have done this for 30 years. But the moment that the government, like in the UK, starts saying, okay, we acknowledge that there is a lack, we need to know better how to, we want more of these studies, but we want to make sure that the estimates are correct and that we can use this estimate with confidence. Then it opens a can of worms. And the first thing is, how can we make sure? We need more research. So thankfully, also thanks to Harman Sagar, who is the guy that I showed you at the beginning, this was pushed as an agenda up to the moment that the Valuing Cultural Heritage Capital Framework was launched into 2021. And the next step was for a joint efforts with the Arts and Humanity Research Council to launch a research project. We were commissioned this research project where we should scope the state of the art internationally and advise what could be research priorities. And this as I can see that there are. Okay, so it got a new life, this this presentation, so never mind. The cultural sector in the UK then has embraced this, and so after our definition of priorities, a call was launched for research in the field. We had identified with the department also culture, media and sport that vetted everything, research questions and research area. So 6 projects have been funded by this, and 2 of this project, one I'm the PI and one I am the COI for this. The project that has been awarded just a few months ago is as a leader, University of Glasgow with me, then Historic England as a partner, and University of Stirling, the strong partnership with ICROM, because this is this partnership on this topic has been going on at least since 2018, when once in Nottingham-on-Trent, David and myself organized a workshop particularly on this topic. Caveat is the project that looks at the valuation of historic high street. Historic high streets are important, complex areas for which the government has already given a lot of funding because they are at the heart of many UK cities, and the project wants to, it's very specific, looks at the triangulation of different methodologies, particularly hedonic pricing, travel costs, contingent valuation, discrete choice experiment, and real world experiment. So in triangulating this on 2 case studies in 2 medium-sized cities in England, we can with certain confidence say we will at the end that certain techniques work better in combination or not, and certain estimates can be, decision maker can be very confident in using them. Or before identifying the case study and applying the non-market valuation, non-market valuation technique, we have a number of methods. It's a very complex technical project. David is part of it. We have also other experts, Marilena Vecco from the Burgundy School, and as I said, ICROM. So we have also a big stakeholders network with us, and the various projects, that the 6 projects that have been awarded by the Department of Culture, Media and Sport in conjunction with the Arts and Humanities Research Council are working together, because at the end of these 3 years of funding, we want to make sure that we have achieved results from all the different points of view that can really increase the confidence. So next, we need to improve decision makers' confidence, and one way is, like in our project, to address the technique bias. We want to develop the theoretical framework, maybe from the definition of cultural capital, what it means in terms of sustainability in economic terms, what has happened in the environmental economic sector has been the development of ecosystem services approach, and this is what we are considering through a number of also commissioned research that I've been involved with the department. We know that there are some challenges, like we need to develop skills, we need to have capacity building, train future generation of cultural economists on these issues, tailor new academic programs, encourage different application of these techniques in different contexts once, hopefully done in a systematic manner. This is one of the aim of the Culture and Capital program of the CMS. So encourage this application, and maybe, and this we are discussing with the ICROM, develop a more simpler local decision makers tool to bring all this academic difficult research also to life. And next week we are organizing also an event on this aspect. I'm fellow at ICROM, and so I have been advising on this for years, and it's very nice to see how ICROM with the DG has also embraced this challenge that from a stakeholder's perspective. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Patrizia. It was very interesting, and more than what you told us, more than valuing cultural capital. Now, please, we have a connection with this presentation. Then we can.
So we can share the. Okay.
At the end, we have 8 minutes for questions still.
We are late, so. Okay.
Then now comes Michela Marchiori, our chief, our leader. Thank you very much for everything you've done for this Congress, and you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Paolo. I thank you very much to Patrizia Riganti, because we have many points. We share many points in our presentation, because both speak about value, evaluation, assess, and so I am very lucky, because if you don't understand, or if I don't understand some of our question, Patrizia help me in the discussion. I am a very lucky woman. In my presentation, I would like to present shortly the main characteristic of the SOFIA model, an holistic and multi-dimensional model for impact assessment of cultural heritage intervention. This presentation is a collective effort of a great group that led the consortium, Sophia Consortium, in 2020 and 2021. And we, in this room, we have two researchers that collaborate, Flavia Marucci and Lucia Marchegiani. The starting point of our project is an Horizon 2020 call, who asked for a social platform on the impact assessment of cultural heritage intervention. Two relevant considerations. Firstly, the European Union strongly believes in the assessment as a means to ensure the quality of the intervention. Today, the importance of assessing intervention is a widely recognized practice, but until a few years ago, it was not the case. And it also, thanks to the effort of the European Commission, that today there is a lot of paper and research about evaluation, and this conference also highlights it. Secondly, the Horizon called for a new tool, a guideline, able to address a fundamental gap in both academic research and policymaker practice, that is to have an holistic and multidimensional model or instruments able to capture all the different impact derived from intervention on cultural heritage. So with this mandate, the consortium that won the call, made up of 7 partners led by Roma 3, had 3 aims: creating this model, gathering a diverse community of stakeholders within a new social platform, and convey a consensus towards a future European action plan in order to create the necessary condition to implement and spread the practice of the assessment through an holistic model. We worked for 2 years, producing 43 deliverables in the midst of the pandemic, but despite the COVID, during this period, we use a very participatory approach. As first strong point of the Sophia model that I would like to underline is that the model is a result of a multidisciplinary approach. It is a result of a great and shared effort of a research team coming from different disciplines who engage in this work: expert, practitioner, researcher, cultural site manager, and local heritage community. We made a community of practice, not only a social platform. And this engagement of the community played a crucial role in the formulation of the holistic and multidimensional model. So I jump briefly to present the analytical model of Sophia. The model is based on 3 axes. The domain axis, that is the areas in relation to which evaluate the expected impacts, the role of people in this model, and time, the time axis, that is when we have to do the assessment process. The model is holistic in a triple meaning. The multi-domain framework aimed to overcome the logic of the 4 traditional domains used in the specific evaluation model. We have highlighted 6 teams and 28 sub-teams. The 6 teams represent the core areas identified as essential when assessing cultural heritage intervention. Their strength consists in the capacity to detect the multidimensional impacts connected to impact assessment. of cultural heritage. But in defining the sub-theme, we tried to underline also cross-cutting issues, that is to detect the interconnection between sub-themes. Only, for example, if we consider, for example, inclusive assets, that is sub-themes under the area social capital. We know, of course, that inclusive access means to assure the accessibility to cultural heritage for all the social group. But these themes, this area of impact, call to eliminate all the barrier, financial, architectural, linguistic, educational barrier. And so the sub-themes inclusive access is directly connected with the themes educational and with the themes identity of place that refer to the narrative of the cultural heritage. But in the first innovation that in this multidimensional grid, we have considered also the counter effect that an intervention can create. For example, always refer to inclusive access for everybody may be in conflict with the site's capacity and safeguarding cultural heritage against human-related risk. So it is connected with the area of protection. The second axis, sorry, I mistake. The second axis is the people axis and evidence the role of people in this multi-domain model. People perspective has a central role, ensuring that all relevant voices and concerns are detected to ensure a successful holistic assessment. This people-oriented attitude is put into practice by defining a stakeholder map during the analysis of the context, by engaging the relevant stakeholders in assessment process, by involving them in the weighting of evaluation criteria, understanding and make explicit the stakeholder position. And last but not least, the people perspective is put into practice through ad hoc survey conducted among the beneficiaries, direct and indirect beneficiary, and specific target of the population. This is one of the innovative aspect of multidimension model. It is a more complex aspect, but also innovative because in the SOFIA model indicator are both quantitative and qualitative measure, but most of them are built through survey ad hoc, considering the difficulty of having statistical indicators available to measure the impact. The third axis is the third axis is time axis and define at which moment of intervention the assessment take place. It is holistic because we can use SOFIA model in each moment, in all different moments of the life cycle of the cultural heritage intervention. Of course, before the intervention, so we have the ex-ante evaluation, during the intervention, ongoing evaluation, and after intervention, ex post. In each key moment, specific assessment objectives are leading the process and different people are involved. SOFIA can be considered a powerful conceptual model with the ambition to inspire its application, but not prescribing recipes. In order to transform and tailor the conceptual model into an operational framework, SOFIA Group Consortium has produced a toolkit for practitioners and for who wanted to or would like to apply the SOFIA model. As you can see, the three aspects of SOFIA model, that is domain, people, and time, are to be adapted and tailored with the contextual factor of the specific organization in which we have to apply the SOFIA model in order to evaluate the impact of this organization. The phase of the toolkit are only 3, but in each phase we have an operational program. The Horizon 2020 code did not provide for the financing of the SOFIA model application. So some of the partners of our consortium decided to experiment the application of the model by financing the research. The aim of this experimental was to understand the strengths and critical point of the model as a basis for spreading its application. Trials are currently underway in Italy, in Spain, and in Austria. But as far as we know, the SOFIA model is in use in various parts of the world, and so, of course, makes us happy, very happy. Roma 3 began testing the model in June 2022. We have chosen 3 different organizations. How many minutes I have? 3 minutes, okay, 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Thank you very much. My discussion. Teatro Acropolis. Teatro Acropolis is a small but very innovative Italian theater in terms of research and in terms of theater production, which had recently made a large investment in the hall, broadening the scope of its activities. San Casciano dei Bagni, I think that all of you know San Casciano dei Bagni, the very beautiful place in Tuscany. The archaeological excavation carried out under the large thermal bath in San Casciano dei Bagni and the discovery of the Etruscan statuettes, of course, have a big potentiality to produce impact on the all context of the San Casciano dei Bagni. And last, but I think not least, Le Case Romane del Celio, in which there is an ongoing creation of a metaverse project here in Rome. This is one of the initiatives that are part of the Great Changes project, one of the project of the Italian National Recovery and Resilience Plan, and also a very important because we have some million of euro to spend in this important project. In brief, the result of our first experimentation. This is some reflection on an ongoing process. The first strengths of the SOFIA model that we derived from this first experimentation are that the SOFIA model is a flexible and dynamic model, easily to adopt. Flexible because we can apply SOFIA model to all kinds of organization, big, large, public, private. It is very flexible and very tailored to the context, but it is also dynamic because the sub-teams can, not the area, the 6 area, but the sub-teams can be modified in coherence with specific aspect of the organization to be assessed, and in coherent with the evolution of the practical and theoretical framework. For example, we are implementing the part of the model focusing on sustainability matters and with particular reference to SDGs. Yes, participatory approach, it is very important because participatory approach can help decision maker to encourage sense making and self-reflection of the decision making, but they can, with this model, they can define when do we want to go, how can we reach our focus, and the external support of the researcher, that because the researcher participate of course of the evaluating process with the other stakeholder, this external support can facilitate and can take the complexity of this process. Which are the gaps? Of course, the model is a resource demanding model because we need many times, confusing, but many persons to make this process, and we need for quantitative indicators, for comparing different contexts and for scaling the model. As you know, actually we have some deficit in the indicators, quantitative indicators. So the open question are, could Sophia model become a process standard, not an output standard or a standard, but a process standard, because we are implementing a toolkit. So a toolkit that is adaptable. And so far, we have proved that the Sophia model is suitable for ex-ante and ongoing assessment, but we have to text the Sophia model for ex-post evaluation. And for this kind of evaluation, we need quantitative data for comparing the result. Thank you very much for the attention.
Thank you very much, Michaela. I think it was a very important closing of our section. The life cycle is really interesting. The circular participation. We started from peace, democracy, and through 50 years of ZF. And now there are one or two questions. We have not a lot of time because of the other section, not for me. That please.
My question will be very quick. I am very interested, and I thank Patrizia Riganti for her contribution, because it seems to me very interesting the new interest of Department of Culture, Media, Sport, that is UK government, about a framework for evaluation in cultural heritage. My question is, but I always thought, also in the past, in a very precise way, Riganti remembered the experience of 80s, 90s. I always thought that in order to have a more robust evaluation kit that make these evaluations more feasible and more feasible for public decision process, with more robustness for public decision process, we need more ex-post evaluation, not only ex-ante evaluation. Because we need case studies, a sufficient number of case studies with what effectively arrives in the medium term after a lot of kind, a sample of different cultural projects. We have a lot of ex-ante evaluation, but less ex-post evaluation. Then my question is, these pilot projects that you are undergoing are ex-post or ex-ante? Because it would be very interesting building sample of knowledge, of applied case studies about ex-post evaluation.
Yeah, one has to clarify what is the UK government position. They use treasury that gives the money basically for changing the world, uses social cost benefit analysis. So you need to estimate costs, you may estimate benefits. The only techniques that estimate benefits associated to public goods like environmental or cultural capital are either revealed preferences or like hedonic pricings that capture, though in the market, some elements that are out of the market, or stated preferences, which have some limitations. The question is that they've done that for natural capital. The government has already identified what we call the green book, that is law basically. You have to apply certain techniques in a certain way. And they have worked for this with academics and universities, colleagues that were expert in environmental economics. They decided they have to do the same for investment in cultural capital. So this will become sort of law in the UK government. That's why it's very exciting from an academic point of view. So they came with to us, the academia, the expert, to have answers on specific questions. How can I do this? That's why we were defining a scoping project, telling them, okay, this is the state of the art. If you want to improve, you have to improve. Aspects that might relate to ex ante and other ex post. There is no, the focus in this moment is improving the techniques, because what has been done worldwide in the application, as I was saying before, is ad hoc. It's not systematic. So we are, I showed some, I've been commissioned research as consultant by the government. Within a small group, we are working on that. And we already, it's not published on the governmental website. The previous one is published, but we have to, they ask us sometimes impossible things like developing an ecosystem service approach for cultural capital. So they want both the theoretical aspects that will inform how this technique will be applied. But they need this technique also because they are the techniques that have been applied for natural capital. So it's a discourse that they are developing at governmental level. I have to say that the natural capital Green Book is the first in the world. So they like to be the first. So they probably, they ask, will do this. That's what we are asked to do. So what is very interesting in this, exciting, I think, in this momentum in the UK is the closeness that they are developing with some trusted expert in trying to define into the details some issues, trying to discuss about solution, even if they are difficult academic issues. I did say to the government, you know, the things we have been debating for 20 years, now you ask me in 3 months to give you an answer. So that is the situation. So yes, some are ex ante, some are ex post, but they want something more general, progress knowledge for decision, to inform decision making.
Allora, sorry, we have to close this section because we have another very important section with Lucia Marchegiani. Thank you, everybody, and we start soon. Who wants to have coffee?
Yeah, we have time for just stretching the legs, grab a coffee, and come back for the next session. Some thoughts on this session on the topic of education for culture, culture for education. So this is, I have to deem responsible for this session. I have strongly pushed towards the inclusion of such theme in this conference. My idea personally is that we might encourage a stronger integration of educational programs in Europe when it comes to cultural education, but foremost for cultural management or cultural heritage management. So, and I must say that as already been mentioned in previous talks, the impact of digital technologies may be a driver of change or may actually hinder change in some cases. So it's a pleasure for me to introduce you to the panel of discussants we have today. I start in alphabetical order from Alexander Brikic. Thank you for joining us from Goldsmith University of London. And then we have Luca Dal Pozzolo, Fondazione Fitzcarraldo. Thank you for being here. Chiara Finocchietti from Cimea. Enzo Lefebvre Cevrini from IALAB, University of Buenos Aires. And Michele Nicolai from CLES. I'll give the floor directly to Enzo Lefebvre, who will speak about artificial intelligence. He's an expert of artificial intelligence, and we've asked to enlighten us on what AI is exactly and what are the potentials for education, for culture. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Fantastic. So a real pleasure being here, and I already excused myself of the fact that I will have to leave almost after my speech, so I beg apologies as well to the discussants. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Professor, for inviting me. One of the things that we've been discussing in the preparation of this important seminar was the necessity to deep dive a bit more into what are the challenges and opportunities that artificial intelligence actually gathers in the making of a new path of the cultural heritage education in one sense, but as well in the upskilling of the current management of the cultural heritage domain. And one of the things that I found extremely rewarding while preparing this is accepting the fact that in the making of let's say of the presentation focused on cultural heritage, that is not really my main area of intervention. I'm more dedicated to the whole composition of artificial intelligence in the public sector. But as well, being a professor of artificial intelligence and ethics at the University of Salamanca, one of the things that I'm deep diving in the last few months is the quintuple helix of artificial intelligence regulation. And in particular is the phenomena that tries to generate a true regulation that encompasses inputs from government, academia, industry, civil society, and NGOs, with a bigger umbrella that is the overall guidelines that are brought by the international organizations. In this case, we have, especially in the realm of cultural heritage, the fact that UNESCO is the very first organization that has released topical guidelines on the use of ethical and trustworthy artificial intelligence. Right now, they are exactly in the making of the specificities of this regulation. So just 3 days ago, they issued one report on the use of artificial intelligence for indigenous communities. Why I'm mentioning this? Because actually this is part of the overall exercise when we speak about, for example, cultural heritage. The point is that Latin American and Caribbean indigenous communities were actually thinking, hey, wait a second, the whole system of regulation of artificial intelligence is basically mainly focused on, is actually mainly focused on a European Western-centric ideology of ethics as well. And we need to start deep diving what are the real differences among the various cultures that are actually going in this direction. So indeed, this happens in a wider phenomena that is about the promise of artificial intelligence. It's like we found a new God. Reality is that this is not the case. And artificial intelligence is able to do really a lot of things. We are, of course, as I noticed throughout the day in the many beautiful presentations that I've seen, we are already understanding that artificial intelligence is among us. So it's not the promise of the future, it's the promise of today. But what we have to think is that we have to narrow a bit the overall phenomena and understand that as well, artificial intelligence is not what in the majority of the cases newspapers and big headlines are telling us. General artificial intelligence is not there. So we are only speaking about narrow or weak artificial intelligence. And weak artificial intelligence, we will see it in a second, is a very particular phenomenon because it has been growing over the last few years, but and maybe the advent of ChatGPT was boosting it, especially in our daily life. By the way, all the pictures that you see in the background of these presentations have been generated thanks to artificial intelligence. And but there is one thing that I would have, let's say, posed this intervention at the very beginning of this day, just to set the expectations. For me, this sentence that Chiara knows quite a lot because I've been mentioning it over and over, but it's the mantra of all my presentations. I put it everywhere I go. Tim Cook, at the commencement day of MIT in 2017, said this sentence that for me is pivotal. I took his sentence. There might be other sentences that maybe are much more prone to respond to this. But technology is capable of doing great things, but it doesn't want to do great things. Technology doesn't want anything. The reality is that, and that's why for me it's very important to remark the fact that we are speaking about weak AI. Weak AI is like is like a machine on a train rack. So we will always be able to enforce, at least so far, we are able to enforce the limits and periphery of what artificial intelligence can do. We can decide artificial intelligence to do more, but will be always under the radar of human willingness and the capacity that we have in responding to those needs. And one of the phenomena that goes in the direction of what I was just saying before is the fact that we are today in a situation of the creation and generation of a lot of systems of artificial intelligence that are biased by default. In March this year, I published, together with few colleagues, just after, I think, 2 weeks after the release of ChatGPT 4, we released a book that is called ChatGPT Imperfect by Design. Why? Because we made testing of how ChatGPT was actually performing, and we found out that in 63% of the cases, the answers were biased. And that in 59% of the cases, we had hallucinations. Okay? So even if ChatGPT has been evolving, we can discuss on how it has been evolving, because actually there are studies that are saying that ChatGPT is becoming more and more stupid, because the prompting that we are asking, opening it up to even, let me put it this way, is not politically correct, to an uneducated set of population, it actually derives the prompting into its own machinery. So it learns by doing, but it learns mainly by the prompting that we ask. So even if I had to go through, let's say, even when I started this presentation with the idea that I was going to have 30 minutes. So I inserted my script into ChatGPT and I asked it, okay, please shrink it into 15 minutes presentation. I'm still at slide 1, so I actually already overpassed 5 minutes of my slide 1. But it took me a lot of time into generating the right prompt to ChatGPT in order to accommodate my needs. If I ask to ChatGPT to resume me a paper, it does it magnificently. But if I ask ChatGPT to resume it into the limit of 700 words, you will see it will go nuts. It doesn't know how to count. So one of the, of course, ChatGPT is one of the phenomena that we are speaking, but we have around 10 top artificial intelligence technologies that are today extremely important in the realm of cultural heritage. Of course, as I was saying, is natural language generation, is natural language understanding, is speech recognition, machine learning, virtual agents, expert systems that actually were at the core, at the basis of the evolution of artificial intelligence. And we have even more segmented artificial intelligence techniques like decision management and text analytics. Is extremely relevant the fact that those technologies are being today part also of a geopolitical game and are being part of an evolving aspect of, I would say, an eternal war between the Western world, or mainly the US world, and China. So while we are in the Western world much more prone to the experimentation in machine learning and natural language processing, actually Italy is among the leaders of natural language processing research, basically because there were few wise people in the Ministry of Education and University and Research 50 years ago that decided that Italian was going to be an abandoned language if there was no possibility of recognizing it into the computational age. And we created the Institute of Natural Language Processing in Pisa, which has, I would say, created the majority of the phenomena that actually today is giving ChatGPT the possibility to live. Okay, so even we need to self-recognize the values of this forward thinking. And this is at the basis of, I would say, even of this conference. We are in a critical momentum where cultural heritage is suffering from phenomena of whatever sort, but including the fact that you have fast tourism, that you don't have anymore the capacity to actually sell properly your cultural heritage and make it a phenomena that actually changes and imposes changes in society. Well, here we have the phenomena regarding machine learning evolution and natural language processing. On the other verso, we have in China a completely different evolution that is mostly dedicated to visual computing, okay, and visual recognition. The fact that today you're suffering from a situation that I would say is also extremely sophisticated, and it has triggered a lot the conversation about ethics in artificial intelligence, like the phenomena of having tasks in schools that are recognizing with two visuals the way students are looking in order to understand whether they are attentive or not to the speaker. No, in this conference, we would have been all scored -20 compared myself by the fact that we get extremely distracted, okay, by a lot of things. But it's not a, for me, it's not a bad thing. It means that you either the one that is speaking is telling bullshit, or is maybe triggering the idea of having an internal discussion between the comrades that you have next to you. But the point is that this has elevated to the possibility of having social scoring. So if you get distracted, you lose points. And if you lose points, you don't go to university. Is an extremely complex phenomenon that elevates the reasoning why today we are debating about, I mean, Lucia was kindly enough. I'm not speaking on behalf of the European Commission because I'm with my professional academic part here today, but I'm working in the European Commission, overseeing part of the evolution of artificial intelligence usage in the Commission. And this to say that there is a big question mark, that reasons why we need to put a very important attention into creating very strong regulations on how we use and how we will develop artificial intelligence. Having said so, we put it before the point of what are we talking about? We are talking about narrow AI or weak AI. Weak AI is not even at the 18% of the possibilities of its own capacities. Meaning that we are now in the moment of generating regulations for the unknown, which is even bigger as a challenge. And one of the challenges is coming here and talking to you, where should we go with cultural heritage, education, and AI, when I don't know what 82% of AI will be in the coming 100 years. I don't know. So what my idea was understanding what are some key things that I guess managers would benefit a lot when it comes to artificial intelligence, and how in the cultural heritage phenomena we need to impose the use of artificial intelligence, or at least the knowledge of what artificial intelligence is, because this is one of the great factors that we don't have the knowledge of understanding how the importance is. ChatGPT, and I keep on insisting on the phenomenon of ChatGPT because it was the groundbreaking element where people actually that used Siri every day to insult it most of the time and to get fun, but discovered that artificial intelligence might be truly useful. And this was a phenomenon that was actually not in our society before November last year. So in 1 year, we got the evolution of the whole society in understanding that artificial intelligence can really benefit our lives. Because before, you were not thinking that Siri was benefiting your life. It was just a joke. It's like Snake in Nokia, okay? So one of the first phenomena is skill detection. We can try to understand more about what are our inner skills in the cultural heritage domain. There is we were speaking with Lucia this morning, the fact that we have an incapacity at the level of HR to know what are the skill sets of the people that are working in a given domain, because their choices were completely unrelated to the fact that they ended up in working in cultural heritage. So this is one of the first, I would say, proactive capacities in using artificial intelligence, in deriving, let's say, a better comprehension of what managers can really do and how can they do it. The second path is adaptive learning. Well, this is an important, is really, I would say, is the future of education. Something that we, especially in the Western world, that is extremely, and Chiara will, I mean, represents here the essential of understanding what are the schemes of how we recognize higher education in the world. But the world is much more faster today than the skills that we were setting 50, 60 years ago when we restarted thinking about education. So one of the phenomena, for example, that I wanted to share is in the artificial intelligence lab of the University of Buenos Aires during COVID said, okay, we need to have for the legal sector an understanding of how artificial intelligence works and what will be the impact of artificial intelligence in the judicial system. And I'm giving this example because this is an ongoing practice, but this can be, I mean, mutatis mutandis can be used in the cultural heritage situation. That is, you have right now a campus that is based on artificial intelligence, that understands your weakness in terms of as a student, and readapts and pushes you to have courses, basic courses or more advanced courses, depending on the learning path that you have, which is completely different than the online learning that you have today, which is basically the representation of what you had in the analogic world. Is exactly the phenomena between, as if I can relate to my daily work, is the phenomena that we had between passing from analogical government to electronical government, which was basically having a sheet and transforming it into an Excel file, but with the same facts and figures, or passing it into a digital government, and right now going much deeper into the smart government, okay, ideology. The smart government ideology, that is the fact that instead of creating and generating services, I close them down, because basically as a government, I'm proactive, so I already respond to your needs. One of the clearest examples that I bring, and doesn't have to do anything with the conference today, but is a very simple phenomenon, a very simple example brought by the region of Lombardy. When a man is turning 50, he receives a letter at home saying, okay, you're turning 50, happy birthday, your happy birthday by the region of Lombardy is an exam of the prostate. Okay? Is a very nice gift. Why? Well, basically, because the cost of an analysis to understand and detect preventively what is the situation of your prostate is 100 euros. The treatment of one single patient for a prostate cancer is 10 million euros. So if I come to you and I say, is your tax worth 100 euros or 10 million euros? So this is the proactiveness. Of course, this is the radical phenomena, but we can try to have much more in terms of education learning path in the realm of cultural heritage that actually encompasses your own skills and presets possible basic modules that are giving you the possibility of deep diving in something that you don't know, instead of creating only boundaries. The third part is the competency building. The competency building, again, here is the possibility of creating and visualizing, thanks to virtual imaging, the possibility of putting hands-on the creation of how you teach something to someone. A very important example that I bring to you that has really, again, nothing to do. Yeah, 2 minutes. I will try to shrink the rest of the 5 minutes into 1 minute. But for me, it was very important to set the tone and maybe to shake a bit of the conversation. Otherwise, you will fall asleep. But the reality is, what about I want to become an archaeologist, but I don't know how to treat an archaeological report? And what about if I put an extended reality goggles on me, that while I'm discovering something, might be a brick in the search for the Metro C, or might be the understanding of how I don't know, a dinosaur report has been found, how to treat it. Even if I don't have the expertise of 20 years as an archaeologist, but actually in that extended reality goggles, I have all the experience captured by archaeologists that maybe right now are 50. So with 30 years of experience. Very important examples on the fact that more and more in the cultural heritage we are using sentiment analysis, and we will be using a lot of sentiment analysis. As well, we will use a lot more the dashboards. Today, we've been seeing those. I mean, some of the examples in the showcases are actually giving us the idea of how a dashboard. There was an example about the usage of TikTok in the PT museums. Actually, this is what is important for TikTok is not the number of videos, but it's the numbers that attract it in order to create a dashboard, in order to understand what are the phenomena that I want to plan in order to manage better the museum. And the extended reality, the fact that I can see through a glass what the Roman Empire was, instead of rebuilding the whole Colosseum. There are some challenges and ethical considerations. As I already mentioned, is the bias in the algorithms, is the accessibility gaps. We have huge issues around accessibility, especially in the era of digital divide. We are more and more separating branches of the society because the poorest have no capacity to work or have an iPhone that costs 1,500 euros. We have still the situation of data privacy and security, but not because we have to be attentive of the data privacy, but we have to build an education around your data. The decision that was made a few months ago by Facebook, setting you a request, do you want to keep on using Facebook without ads and with you maintaining all your data, you pay me 12 euros a month, or you go for free. I bet all of you went for the free version. Will basically valuing your data less than 12 euros a month, which means that you actually are producing shit. I mean, so don't go for the greatest pictures and try to sell your picture, because actually, if your picture is very good but you value less than 12 euros a month, means that actually your picture is not valid. And then is transparency and explainability. I'm sorry, I'm getting out a bit of the formal context of the university, but again, is to spice a bit the conversation. Transparency and explainability, again, but here there is a huge importance into making possible to your students to understand what you're talking about, which is 99% of the cases impossible. You have students, we've seen this situation where you had students, or I mean youngsters, not willing to tell to their gynecologist if they were or not sexually active, but at the same time having an app where you have all your periods, all your sexual activities registered. Is incredible. But this is part of the fact that we don't have an education about the transparency and explainability of the use of artificial intelligence in your phone. I close with the idea that there is a path towards an European curriculum. I think that this is more part to Chiara Finocchietti to mention, because she's the expert. But here is very important that we need to work much more on the interoperability of education. There is a very important phenomenon here that blocks the interoperability of our education path in Europe. The roles of universities in higher education, they need to understand they are the architects of the future. And I guess that this still is not very well understood in the university world. We need to explain and build change management policies, because with all the digital transformation, it comes the necessity to have a change management plan. But majority of the cases, we never have a change management plan. We don't know even where to start with a change management. There are future directions. As I said in this, and this is my last slide, AI transformative potential in building agile professionals equipped for the challenges of the future is #1 challenge that we have. And especially in cultural heritage, because I think that they are the preservers of the past, the present, and the future, not equipping them with the valid tools in order to progress in educating about the past, the present, and understanding it in a future perspective is extremely important. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Enzo. If there is a quick question or comment, or we'll save it for later, but I know that Professor Lefebvre has to leave soon, so if there is any at the end, I will collect and get back to you. Thanks.
Thank you.
And as you mentioned, exploiting the opportunities, but also being very aware of the threat of AI is very important for the build of a shared curriculum or integrated curriculum. So As I was introducing before, we have we have asked Chiara Finocchietti from CIMEA to set up the scene for the integration challenge or opportunities of the integration of curricula, as CIMEA is the enigmatic center for recognition and accreditation of in the international setting. So I will leave you the floor to Chiara. Thanks. And yeah.
Thanks to Professor Marchegiani for this invitation. And yes, I will ideally start from where Professor Lefebvre-Cervini ended his fascinating presentation, as always. And what I will try to give you is a little bit of data around the cooperative approach in cultural heritage. So to what extent, according to the data we have, cultural heritage is at the center of a collaborative approach or European approach in higher education. Of course, this is not a comprehensive research. This will be a very interesting topic actually for research. And one other topic is to what extent higher education is tackling the topic of AI for cultural heritage. This I didn't, it's a search that I didn't do for this time, I will do for the next one. So just to give you an idea, so we will basically go from in a climax, let's say, of in an increasing order of internationalization and the integration of different curricula, from more a national one to a international and European one. So just to give you an overview, I try to compare the numbers of courses, higher education courses at all level, master, bachelor, master, and third and PhD level, in cultural heritage, or belonging to the domain of cultural heritage in 3 countries, Italy, Germany, and France. I choose these 3 countries basically because we are comparable, more or less, for the system of higher education, for numbers of population. So just to give you a quick overview about Italy, we have the data are taken by Università, that, as you probably know, is the repository of all the programs, all higher education programs in Italy. In Università, we have 55,000, more than 5,200 programs. So those are all the programs in Italy, bachelor, master, and PhD level. 71 of them belong to the domain of cultural heritage. Actually, they are not all on cultural heritage management, mainly are conservation, restoration, preservation, etc. 39 bachelor level, 32 master level. So it's quite, they are quite balanced between, let's say, the more specialized level, master level, and the bachelor level. Interestingly enough, we found only one course, university course in cultural heritage management. Okay, so that's what appears from Università. To be totally transparent, the prompt, if we speak with artificial intelligence, was cultural heritage and cultural heritage management in English. Okay, so probably we will maybe have few more searching with the Italian version, but we saw that they were quite aligned actually. So probably all the courses have also translation of keywords in English. France, second example. So here we look at to Campus France, that is the Agency for Internationalization for France. And searching Campus France, we found 58 courses belonging to the domain of cultural heritage. Also here, many different, let's say, aspects of cultural heritage. 18 licence level, so bachelor level. 29 master, so master level. 8 courses, we found 8 courses belonging exactly to cultural heritage management, of which only 1 licence, 1 bachelor level, and 7 master level. So compared to Italy, France seems to have more courses in management of cultural heritage. Third example, third and last national example, Germany. So actually Germany has more than 22,000 programs mapped in the DAD database. DAD is the, like Campus France for France, is the Agency for Internationalization in France. 20 courses, but only 20 courses belonging to the domain of cultural heritage. Here we made the research also, and also for the Campus France, we also did the research in German and French. And in this case, we have 7 bachelor level courses, and 13 master level courses, and 4 courses belonging to cultural heritage management as such. Okay, now moving a step forward in the European integration. As you probably know, one of the key components of the European Union strategy for universities are the European University Alliances. I guess many of you are expert on European University Alliances. They are seen by the Commission as a vision to create European campuses. The idea was launched by Macron in a famous speech at La Sorbonne University in 2018. So now we had 5 calls to finance European Universities Alliances. Actually, the last call is now open. It's currently open. And we have 50 European alliances, basically consortia of cooperative consortia of universities in Europe. And the idea is to have an interdisciplinary approach to education. We say 50 European University Alliance. The ambition is to reach 60 by next year, and with this latest call. And Italy is present in 35 alliances, so it's quite represented. And we found it's very difficult, so we have been searching for, in this map of 50 universities, it's very difficult, we have to say, to understand what are the key areas, if there are key thematic areas for these alliances. But at least we found one university that have a specific focus on cultural heritage, that is Una Europa. So at least one alliance with this focus. And the last slide, well, it's not the last, I still have one. So moving again to a step forward in the level of integration, we have joint programs and joint degrees. It's very difficult to have, there is not a unique and comprehensive database of joint program, because we wanted to test if there are, how many joint programs in cultural heritage management we have in Europe. This is very difficult because there is no unique database. What we have the so-called DECAR database. That is a database that contains all the all the reports of institutional and programmatic accreditation made by quality assurance agencies in Europe. Okay, so it is a reference point. It has more than 98,000 program mapped in Europe that are actually few, because for instance, our Italian quality assurance agency is not yet registered in ECHA, so the Italian courses are not there, just to make an example. But anyway, even on this, we found only 48 courses belonging to cultural heritage, but in this case, we've searched with cultural heritage in English. Probably searching with the different languages, we would have found more, but we should go with all the European languages. And in the DECAR database, there is a section on joint programs accredited in line with the European standard of quality assurance, and there were no joint program registered. So this will be very interesting to understand if there are no joint program at all, or this is simply because we don't have joint program in line with this approach. And finally, let's say moving to the last one of most recent development, even if it's not so recent actually, probably you have heard about micro-credentials. So the European Commission since 2020, and this is also part of the strategy for higher education, is pushing very much on micro-credentials, so short learning courses targeted to labor market. That could be very interesting also for cultural heritage issues and management, and also as a way to pilot, for instance, collaborative approach by university, because they are usually short courses. They can range from 6 CCTS to 12, 15, 20. So it could be a way to pilot a cooperative approach, and they are quicker, targeted to labor market. So just to share that we are working to use text mining, so artificial intelligence, to map learning outcomes of microcredential. This process is ongoing. It is a project with the University of Pisa, so exactly using text mining. So we will be able to give you some results, but I can tell you that cultural heritage at the moment seems not to be one of the common pattern of microcredential. And actually this could be interesting because in the future we can use text mining and artificial intelligence to map, to analyze learning outcomes of all courses in Europe and to see to what extent there are courses that touch upon cultural heritage, and also what are the common pattern or the different pattern of cultural heritage in Europe. So I will stop here my presentation. I hope, how to interpret this data, I leave them to you because you are the expert in cultural heritage management studies. What I can say, from our observatory is that for sure there is room for, it seems, according to the data, that there is room for improving the level of cooperation, for having more cooperation on inter-university cooperation, joint program, etc. Interoperability, educational interoperability, as has been defined by Professor Lefebvre-Cervini, on cultural heritage. But I leave how this data can feed the discussion. This I leave to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chiara. Thanks a lot. We will certainly be happy to grasp your suggestion of micro-credentials and pilot test for some cooperation and collaboration. Is there any question for Chiara? Yes, please.
Thank you very much for the interesting presentation. I was wondering, we were looking at the data from different countries, and I was wondering if you also grasped some of the reasons why there was these huge differences among countries that, as you said, are in a way comparable. I don't know if you did also this kind of, let's say, quantitative research while you were doing this collection of data. Thank you.
So we only look at quantitative data because we are not expert, let's say, subjects or field expert. So we are expert of higher education curricula and of integration. So this is actually an interesting research question, but probably you are more expert also, probably you are cooperating with German, French universities. So of course this is, I must, let's say from a methodological point of view, it's a very surface analysis, simply searching in the database with cultural heritage and cultural heritage management in the English and in the French and German and Italian. So it will be, we will need a much more detailed research, but anyway, it's some, we already have a kind of indication. So this, I don't know if this is according to academic tradition, etc., but this maybe it's more for a subject expert to discuss.
Here it is.
Thanks. That's actually referring to the part I couldn't present earlier. In the German example, you used the word kulturelles Erbe. That's officially now accepted. It was long almost forbidden word because it had old Nazi connotations and only used in the GDR actually. But you didn't ask, for example, for archaeology, art history. All this is what is related to, just examples, is related to, of course, to cultural heritage. Yeah? So that means the issue of language is extremely underestimated in Europe. Still, okay.
If I may very quickly comment, thank you so much, because actually this point of languages is key in this interoperability of ecosystem, and I would say that is even more important for cultural heritage studies. But I don't know, but this could be also, this is let's say, I think one of the top level group of experts in this field. This would be very interesting to understand to what extent there are studies on the different academic tradition of study program approaches to cultural heritage in some European countries. This would be very, from our perspective, comparative analysis among different systems in Europe will be very interesting to understand if maybe there are differences or if these differences are only, let's say, are less evident because we should search for other terms? Thanks.
Thank you. So after having had an overview of the possible futures and then an overview of the, let's say, existent, but also the trend in, the possible trend in cooperation among different systems, national systems in Europe, we can deep dive the university experience talking with Alexander Brick. Sorry, I cannot pronounce your Brickich. Okay, thanks. From, as I said, Goldsmith University of London, and they have a great track record on such a path. So I will leave you the floor, yes, for your presentation about your experience and the challenges. Thanks.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Lucia. Thank you, everyone. And I will try to be equally magician, like they gave me 5 minutes. It will become 15, well, actually 50. Anyway, I mean, we're talking in the conference on culture shapes our future, the role of culture, and the last session for today is about education. Education in the context of everything that we're saying and all of these dystopian, mostly dystopian conversations about the AI, and I guess a lot of us were questioning in the last year, what can be my alternative career? I mean, luckily for most of you here, you're close to retirement or already retired. But I have to say that a lot of my colleagues, I mean, have been actively discussing, I mean, what else can I do? Sorry? Exactly. What I wanted to really briefly show to you is a snap kind of case study from the UK contextually, but also in the through the example of Goldsmiths and what is happening in the UK when like looking into maybe some sort of not so distant future for some European countries that are often unfortunately looking towards UK and UK educational framework. So thinking about the context, just briefly, I won't go too deeply into it, but there is like this long now already season of conservative governments, where I also include the New Labour because it kind of had almost not so different policies in regards to the education and also culture. Let's not go there. The other sector is something that I called performing Brexit or performative Brexit from the moment when the Brexit effectively kicked in, and also COVID and post-COVID situation. Some of the sort of results on the ground in regard when it comes to this context is that higher education, from the perspective of the elite, political elite in the society, is presented as seen as an investment in a very literal sense. And translated into, I mean, I'm not a cultural economist, but translated into money in a very, very literal sense. And universities in the UK, I mean, that process started a long time ago, but in the recent years are definitely completely on the market. And that's why I'm saying COVID and post-COVID and so on. This is the sort of COVID situation. During the COVID, the current Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, said when they asked him, okay, you're giving support to various people, but what about the artists? Most of them are freelancers. I said, well, you know, they need to find another job. I mean, arts and culture, that's already some kind of a hobby. And this is some of the response of the classical musicians from London. Like they gave the suggestion, oh, okay, what could I do? So Tony said, like, instead of being a trombonist, I'll be a delivery driver. Emily, oboist, waitress. And they actually did this work because they actually during the COVID couldn't couldn't actually do what they were doing because they were hired as a freelancers in different orchestras. And you know how much time goes into the education of one trombonist or oboist, and practice, and so on and so on. Rishi Sunak at that point said kind of, well, you know, it's their choice. I mean, it's like kind of a hobby, you know, so they kind of made that choice. But also from the perspective of one economist that I read at that time, he was saying, he called it a lifestyle economy. Like you are participating in a lifestyle economy, you're not contributing to the main measure of the success in our society, which is GDP. So it's your choice. I mean, because we can't see your participation when it comes to the measurements. So what can you do? That's your choice. But then again, going to the UK context, it's again politically, and here I don't want to cite names, but you can find these direct quote from the media, from the ministries of education and culture, and we changed them so many times in the last 10 years in the UK. Basically, social sciences, humanities, and the arts, as a cluster where I worked, are seen as centers of so-called destructive Marxist academics. Goldsmiths, where I work, especially seen and flagged as one of those, promoting Vogue culture and so on. And universities are seen by, let's say, all the sides, and the UK is very clearly separated into two sides, which I always found weird because I come from, you know, different background. I come from socialist Yugoslavia and so on. It's like, so culture wars, you know, in the UK context are something that is happening live at all the time in the universities. But what happened very radically closer to the end of the pandemic is that when the Ministry of Education sent us all a letter where they were announcing that a selection will be made, and based on that criteria, they will be in the future giving support to some of the educational institutions, which they're almost not giving, but based, because they learned it from the pandemic, based on the notion of usefulness and uselessness. Pandemic has shown them what is useful and what is saving lives, and what is useless and is not creating, saving lives or creating jobs and so on. And the Office for the Students, which is a regulatory body in the UK, is one of the key indicators for teaching excellence framework, for research excellence framework, and so on. Not the only one, of course, but one of the leading one is the percentage of the students that right after graduation get the jobs on the market. So what happens at Goldsmiths? Since 2021, so it's a perfect storm in a way. Because of this post-Brexit sort of performativity, there's a dramatic decrease of EU students. We almost don't have any students from the EU anymore because they're treated as international students. So instead of paying like 3 years ago, 1,500 euros per year for a study, which they could afford and they found it okay. Now they're supposed to pay like any international students beyond the EU, like between 15, 20, 25,000 euros per year, pounds, sorry. The other thing is shifting the trends with the UK students, less and less UK students. We kind of like, when we see a UK student joining, I'm talking about cultural policy, arts administration, we're talking about other social sciences, humanities courses. When we see a UK student coming to us, you know, we're celebrating, you know, but we have a significant rise of students coming from China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and South Korea, which in the mix creates a lot of questions for us, you know, regarding the curriculum, syllabus, pedagogy of teaching, and so on, and I'll get back to that. But also an interesting thing, because of these kind of standards that the government set, you know, what is successful, what is useful, what is useless, you know, the new senior management at Goldsmiths that came with like large ideas of transformation hired KPMG to actually measure our efficiency and effectiveness. And the way they did it is they did it on the base of the program and the course. So for example, theater and performance department and their programs were measured in a way, and I'm not allowed to share that document, but it's literally there in the document, saying that based on the number of students they have and amount of money that these students are bringing to the university, the volume of the space that they use at the college is not adequate, you know, to do, you know, amount of resources that they're spending. So it's very directly and completely kind of in a completely unbelievable way, you know, the sort of measurement units of usefulness and usefulness and uselessness. But then on the other side, what we actually teach and propagate, you know, and one of my favorite European philosophers before Berardi, when he was at Goldsmiths before the pandemic in 2018 in our lecture hall, he was shouting, "Poets are not doing their job. They need to explain to people that they don't need jobs." And a few years after that, you know, the government is telling us, you know, only those that, you know, have the jobs after that are counted, you know, and you're going to go all get fired if you don't give them jobs. And then, you know, walking down Tate Modern, you know, there's this guy that I see from time to time. He has a sign saying "Poets for Hire," and people walk by and sit there and give him 20 pounds and have a short conversation with him. And then after that, he writes a poem based on the knowledge that he get. And it's like he created a job for him in a way. So this kind of notion of job, work, and creativity is something that became completely insane. But also Ai Weiwei, as the artist, 2021, you know, he said the job of an artist is to have no job. And everything, you know, that we're doing, and so many other examples contradicting the policymakers and politicians and what they're telling us to do. So, and another thing, you know, I mentioned culture wars and everything that is on the inside happening as a result of all of this, and very important processes that are happening, which we're almost not allowed to do because of all of these other things that I'm talking about. Besides the AI that we talked about, one of the most important processes is this process that is called in the UK decolonization of curriculum, and which it became a central agenda to everyone in the UK academia, especially from the context of social sciences, humanities, and the arts. And but this process, of course, I mean, everyone in practice realized that, that there are different approaches to this process, however you want to call it, depending on the country, culture, context, and so on. So the questions such as what does it mean to initiate decolonization as a process if you are a British university? And then in the context of the classroom where you almost don't have British students in, and you have literally this year in the course that I direct, MA in Arts Administration and Cultural Policy, 80% of students are coming from China, 80%. And then we're discussing the notion of decolonization from like the British, and then in the tutorials speaking with these students, and they're completely puzzled, like what, of course, from the perspective of China, if we reverse it, I mean, China could also talk about decolonization from their point of view, but like we don't have that knowledge from their point. So it's a mess. So who is decolonizing what, and what are we actually doing? So what I wanted to shortly present is this sort of confusion that I think we need to put this back to the table, because although yes, AI is coming, but we need to deal with these important questions in the space of education in culture and for culture at our universities, because that's such an important part of the ecosystem that we're discussing here this whole day. And I'm hoping that it's there to stay. But at this moment, this space is used for various experiments, political mostly, and education is sidelined everywhere. in the UK context, this social contract that at some point existed where education, higher education was not completely on the market until relatively recently. I mean, 20 years ago, it wasn't like this in the UK. It was a different situation. But the social contract of this kind is disrupted. But at the same time, instead of being on a symbolical level, a space for a social dialogue, it is used and misused by various actors as a space for expanding and extending polarizations, which is not constructive, and it is not useful for our cultures at all. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, Alexander. This is very inspiring. And yeah, I leave the floor for questions. Yes, please. Michela.
No, okay. Okay, thank you very much for your speech, because we are just at the end, quite at the end of our first day, and I think that we talk not so much about two words that are very important. We talk somehow, but about stakeholders and especially governance model. That means what kind of cultural development or sustainable cultural development we can talk about if we don't talk about the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is the kind of democracy we use to manage culture. So participative democracy is one concept, representative democracy is another concept. So what kind of democracy we want to manage culture? Thank you. It's a little bit a question and a comment.
Yeah,
sorry about
that. It's really good. I'll just use it for a short kind of story, again, connecting it to what I was talking about. You know, at Goldsmiths, we have been on strike for the basically last 5 years, you know, on and off, but for various reasons, local disputes, national strike, and so on. And besides the union, we also decided because of the notion of governance, we decided to create something that we called collective change, which was a ground up movement. There, if you're interested, there are also, you know, academics, whenever something happens, they create an academic article to use the opportunity, you know, and publish something. But it was an attempt to kind of do something from the ground up and so on. So one of the first things that we were trying to do when we created that collective was to figure it out who owns Goldsmiths. You know, I wasn't born in the UK. I'm British, but I'm not born in the UK. And most of the people, we figured out no one knows the answer. So we went into forensics and digging, you know, UK is different than some other countries. You know, it's like usually here, Ministry of Education founds or at least at this moment is maybe the formal founder. There, you know, we couldn't find it, you know. So it ends up that, you know, at some point, group of people gathered, some stakeholders from the local environment. They wanted to create a university or polytechnic or some kind of school that is open for the people that are not usual suspects for the higher education, which is a very good story. But then how usually things happen in the UK, they created a charter and offered it to the Queen so that the Queen is the founder. And then Queen said, yes, I accept formally, and returned the charter back and said, you're founded now. And in a way, basically that meant, in a lawful sense, that we are Goldsmiths. Who is Goldsmiths? Goldsmiths are the people who are at that moment at Goldsmiths, you know, who work at Goldsmiths. So it's a collective ownership. Yeah. But whenever we wanted to perform or kind of bring back to that idea of collective ownership and kind of participative democracy in a certain sense, and we even kind of created the discussions with students and created some sort of suggestions of model, there's no way we couldn't go through the ceiling, you know. So who puts the council? I don't know how to get to the council. Where is it? But who owns it? We own it. You know, it's like
Sometimes it's not so different in public universities.
I know. I say so, but that's why, like, going back, I agree with you. Going back to the question, you know, what's happening with the democracy and how do we bring this back to the question of democracy? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So you are the left naughty extremists after all. Thanks a lot. I was wondering whether these sort of issues arise more for culture and cultural education because of the, let's say, intrinsic value, aesthetic, and so on, or that's for every discipline. But this intertwined relation between culture and education is some kind of a special relation, and I guess Luca Dal Pozzolo will also dig deep into this kind of relation. Thanks. I leave you the floor.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Well, some notes about the relation between culture and education. That seems to be a very close domain, perhaps only one domain, but in reality it is not so. They are really separated. There are a lot of frictions, and this is strange if we think a little bit about what is culture, what is education, and so on. Yes, the frictions and the differences are different in different levels of education and so on. From the 1990s, we just saw a flourishing of cultural courses inside universities and masters and courses and so on. Also in cultural management or in heritage management, but in some way there was a great expectation about a reform, a general reform in Italy that could open to new profession, to new competencies, new skills that were everywhere researched by the great institution, from the market to the direction to the management and so on. This doesn't happen in some way. There's not a new openness toward a new generation of skills and profession and so on. So also this new courses has been a little bit depressed by the difficulties of finding jobs after the education, and that was a great pity. But this is in some way intertwined with let's say uncompleted reform of the constitution between the federal model and the central one, and all this way of centralizing a little bit, decentralize another little bit, so that it is very difficult for institutions to have a strategy and to have also the right skill inside to have the possibility to develop a new way of managing heritage and the cultural field. But that said, well, at the lower level, the friction are also more. I mean, the secondary school and the elementary school and so on. There are a sort of different universe of difficulties in this field. One of the evidence was shown by the COVID. A lot of theater, cinemas, museums that had been obliged to to have a refurbishment, to cope with the national laws about the health, security, and so on, offer their location, offer their rooms to the schools that were suffer for the impossibility of having students in the rooms. And they offer not only the space, but also the possibility to interact with programs and so on. This was an opportunity that was completely abandoned in some way. It was a sort of manifesto that produced nothing. And because of lot of complexities, bureaucratic complexities and bureaucratic mechanisms, I do not say that that was easy to do that. For sure, it was not easy, but COVID was not something easy. So it could be also the occasion to move something instead of well, having a great polemic about the wheels on the tables and so on. But anyway, but COVID show also different weaknesses of the cultural systems. Museums, theaters, cultural institutions were hit in a very huge way, and the one that suffered the more were the one who had the most part of the income coming from the market. In some way, the institution that followed the push for being on the market, for having less public financement and so on, that were the institution that suffered more, and this in some way shows also that the model that if you want to grow, you have to be on the market, you have to sell more tickets and so on. It's a fake. It's not so. This is not a growing model for the institution. And this posed the question of another business model for the institution, for museums, other alliance with other stakeholders, other parts of the civil society. For instance, the territory. For instance, the schools. For instance, the role that all these cultural institutions can have on the local place, on the territory. There are a lot of possibility of intertwining activities with the health system, with the school system and so on, that are in some way marginal and not really explored. In my opinion, this has to be a direction for the policy of the future, to link in a strong way the institution to the needs of the territories. That does not mean to be, let's say, blocked in a little territory. It means to have a double capacity of promoting something that could be understood worldwide, and in the same time to have a big role on the local territory. This could be, but we have also to face, let's say, the series of constraints in the relation between education and culture. And we made a research 2 years ago, just before, no, more than 2 years ago, just before the COVID, just to know why the relation is so difficult between the secondary school, the primary school, and and for instance, museums or theater and so on. First of all, money. A lot of these activities proposed by the cultural institution are not for free. They have a ticket. It's low. We have to admit that it's not a higher cost. But if you sum that to the transportation and so on, the total amount is still low, but it's still low for people who are enough money. For people who have more than one son and less money, this is an effort that could be a constraint. Then the bureaucracy to made all the paper to bring the students out of the school and bring them to the museum or the theater is terrible. The agreements with the other professors and teachers, because normally you need 1 more hour. It is not possible to go in a museum and be back in 1 hour. So there is a complex of the insurances and the personal responsibilities of the teachers. And all this is a sort of great barrier, so that only few heroes are able to overcome this barrier because they are devoted to this mission. So in a certain number of teachers, only a little part of them is able to invest so much time and responsibility and work to do that. And this is interesting because in the same time, the Italian laws has abolished the relation between the residents and the school. So now parents can choose the school of their son and daughters, like with a Chinese menu, 43, 32 on the other part of the city and so on. So there is no more geographical relation between students and the residencies. So this means that in choosing the school and inside the school the sections, the level of activities of the section is considered a plus, so that those who have care of their son and their daughters and they have money to do that, they are inscribing their son to that section, that schools, so that the result is a sort of jeopardization in which there are place of excellence and the rest is apply the normal standard of and this is interesting because this is a spiral that differentiate the level of the schools in the territory, and in some way it is with a different process. What you were speaking about expanding polarities. In the public school, in this sense, there is a great penetration of the market that is subtle. Nobody decided that there is that the school they have to make their competition. Nobody decided that the school are on the market, but in the reality they are so. So and this is something that we have to reflect about, because to go to the theater, to the museums and so on, perhaps it's much more important for those families who have less resources in terms of education, in terms of money, than the high level people. So this is something that have to be faced, and probably it is necessary to address new policies to make this relation more easy and less, let's say, inadequate to offer to everybody the same opportunities. Things are not so difficult. The problem is to break the silos in which the administration is organized. And this is the real enterprise. This is the real battle. Because, yes, we can have policies at the national level, but it is necessary to have policy also at the local level, at the city level. It is, in my opinion, it is not so easy to make an insurance by the administration of a town that cover a certain number of activities of the school, so that this has not to be the personal research of each teacher. Perhaps it is possible to make an agreement with the transportation systems. The cities are funding the transportation systems with billions and billions. Now, if we use some little algorithms of the AI, it is possible to program the movement of the classes in a very effective way at a low cost. It's easier to do that. So perhaps there is a lot to do also at the local level to implement this relation. The problem is that more than the artificial intelligence, we are fighting with the natural stupidity. And I'm a little bit scared that the artificial intelligence will not replace totally the natural stupidity, and we will have to live with for a long time. But in this sense, it is important also to think that we can think to very simple and obvious policies just to avoid these differences and to improve a relation that is crucial. It is no meaning that schools, museums, theater, cinema has this really weak relation. No means at all. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks a lot. I think the demographic curve is not going to make things better in terms of polarization and competition between schools. Is there a question? Yes, thanks. No, because they can't hear you from home. Thanks.
It's just a comment. Okay, so it is not a matter of policies. It's a matter of politics. So maybe it's time for a manifesto, because we all know that if foundations uh, 60% from the state make children and young people pay when they are between 14 and
Prova. Secondo me lì si è scaricata la batteria.
young people do enter museums. And you're right also, I have 2 teenagers at home. No teacher is going to accompany them because insurance does not cover outdoor walk to museums. So it is not a question of policies, it's a question of politics. Culture is not inclusive as it should be because of politics, not policies, in my opinion. So I think your presentation strictly relates to the previous one. So.
Thanks also for the comment. And I guess we have the perfect conclusion by Michele Nicolai, showing us some evidence from the social cohesion plan that may have an impact on this sort of complicated relation. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I think that we had a very interesting food for thought over the last presentation, and we have a lot of elements that we could consider. And the theme of this session today, education for culture, culture for education, could make us thinking a lot of what is culture, what is the education, and to what extent culture and education are related one to each other. What I would like to try to do today, and I know that I'm the last speaker and it's quite late and you are all quite tired, is to just to share a little definition of what we mean with culture and education, and then to give you some ideas, some indication on how the cohesion policy, that it's an important policy that invests in a lot of money in each country, is taking into account culture and education, and to give you, as I say, some idea if these themes are really taken correctly into account. I don't want to spend too much time to try to define what is culture and what is education, because I think that we all have an idea, even though it's not so easy to define exactly to what extent education is, and whether education is related to bring out, to stimulate a process that is much more than just teaching or give some instruction. And also, if we talk about culture, also culture, it's something that could be analyzed from a very different perspective, as also my colleague have just pointed out. And then if we just have a look to what the European Agenda for Culture is defined as strategic objects, we can see that the 3 main strategic objects that are mentioned are take advantage of the power of culture for social cohesion and well-being, supporting culture-based creativity in education and innovation, employment and growth, and strengthening international cultural relationship. And these already give us an idea that how is broad the definition and how we could consider the field where culture is involved, and which are the elements that should be taken into consideration speaking about culture. Education for culture. Education for culture, it's another room, another definition that we should try to put together these 2 concepts. And probably education for culture can be linked to identify all the investment in education in order to try to stimulate the culture and the benefit of the culture. And to this extent, we have some support from also some European financial program, in particular the Creative Culture program, that it's a program that is going into this detail. And then we have all the other field that is culture for education, that it's another way to see the face of a coin. And in this extent, we can see that for sure, cohesion policy and structural fund are identifying some support. If we just spend a few seconds to analyze which are the main objectives that are focused the cohesion policy for the 2021-2027 period, that is the current programming period, we have actually one objective policy that is dedicated to a more social and inclusion Europe. And inside this objective, we have actually 2 or 3 elements that could give a support for education and for culture. We have 2 objectives, 2 priorities that are referred to employment and education and training. And what would be interesting to analyze is to see whether employment can be related to culture and how culture could support also the employment. Of course, and we have talked early on about education, what education can do also to support culture. I think that it's quite clear that culture and education are two fields that must be that are linked, that are very well collegated one to another. And then we have some interventions, some rooms to finance culture. What we mean with culture, to finance more infrastructure, more activity to develop concrete culture. And to do this, the cohesion policy is identifying different funds, that is the European Social Funds and the RDF, the European Regional Development Fund. If we look more in details on how, in particular, Italy is taking into account these 2 fields, then education and culture, we can see that education, as we say, it's something that is financed by the European Social Fund, very rarely is concretely related to culture. I mean, we have in all the operational programs that are they are financed by the European Social Funds, the teams of employment and education and training. But in just a very few cases, we have a specific focus on education, employment and education related to the culture field. While if we look at culture, but it's seen more as enhancing the role of culture and sustainable tourism in the economy, then is more seen as an asset to develop the local development. And for culture, we have some programs that are more concentrated and focused on these themes. In particular, again, if we just focus our attention on what is the Italian partnership agreement, that it's a document that describes the strategy of how the cohesion policy is implemented in each country. And if we just analyze which are the areas that are implemented, that are mentioned in the partnership agreement, we can see that there are some actions that are concretely finalized in order to support culture, and is very much seen the need to try to put together what is the support given by the RDF, what is the support given by the European Social Funds. That are 2 different funds, and in most of the cases are financed by 2 different programs. And this is something that makes things a little more complicated, because I believe that it's very important to try to find an integration between structural intervention and intervention on human, and only the integration of this fund can help to do this. If you look, as I say, in the Italian partnership, we can see that there is a need, a concentration identified to finance a participatory governance. That means to try to put in place new model that can make a collaboration
between governance and other entities, especially third sector entities. We have a priority to invest in partnership because we know that partnership is really, it's definitely a main point that should be exploited. The collaboration between sector, that's another issue very important, I think, to try to develop the culture in the different field. And then, of course, especially for Italy, tourism is seen as a main asset that can try to stimulate the implementation also of tourism and then of people, and then to have related to local development. We have in Italy, and that's another thing that it's quite interesting to analyze, only one national program that is related to culture, but it's a program that is interesting only 7 regions in the south of Italy. That means that at a national level, we don't have a program that is financing culture also in the central and north of Italy. And that's already something that should make think why this has been done and why there has not been created a program at national level on culture. On the other hand, we have some good experience for me that have implemented at local level. For instance, I'm talking about the regional program of Lazio region. In particular, I'm looking at the regional program financed by European Social Fund. I think that in Lazio region, culture has been seen as a main priority of the development of local development, and there are some important projects that have been financed in order to promote culture, that are an hub for culture, sociality and work, to promote interaction and contamination between idea and new collaboration, and to try to enhance culture and human capital through networking and training. We have a project that is called Officina Pier Paolo Pasolini, that it's a laboratory that gives an opportunity to artists to work together and to develop something. We have a regional school for cinematography, the Gian Maria Volonté, that it's another good example. We have what is called an ABC school project, that it's again a project that is concentrated on integrate education and culture, and I think it's very interesting experiment that has been refinanced from the previous programming period. And then we have some specific projects that are related, just an example, to Artistic Garden, that actually it's a program that is financed all over Europe, and it's also financed in our region. Just to come to a conclusion and just to give you some idea on what extent these themes, in particular culture, is focused with the structural funds. Cohesion Fund, I think that can offer a concrete support to develop of culture and education for culture. Then there is room for financing, and the activities that are implemented are very much left at national level. I think that it's crucial to try to foster the integration between European Social Fund and European Regional Development Fund in order to try to, as I said, make a link between what we can do in the infrastructure, what we can do in investment, in material investment, and what we can do in investing in person, investing in people. And this, I think that it's something that in most of the case, it's not so easy to reach. It's not so easy to reach also because, as I mentioned earlier on, in most of the case are different programs. That means that are managed by different organizations. I mean, even if, for instance, Lazio region have one program financed by ESF, one program financed by ERDF, are two different departments, two different assessorati, I don't know how to say, two different sectors of the region that are dealing this, and this collaboration is not very easy to find. Not just I just try to have a look to different regional programs and to see how culture in particular is mentioned in their program. And I have to say that are not so many the programs that are considered and are financing, especially some project to try to develop culture. I think that just to close, local and regional authority can have a good benefit of the use of these funds, are important funds, especially for Italy, but there is still a lot to do in order to try really to integrate and also to have a view that culture can be a driver for local development. And I think that it's not so shared, just my colleague just point out this point, and I totally agree, is not so easy to understand that this is really, it could really be a good opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thanks. It's a nice perspective, and it somehow reconnects to what we have heard in previous sessions. So it's, as I said, I knew it would be the perfect conclusion, but maybe there are some questions. Comments? Pardon? Give us the money. No, but I was thinking of you actually in the last slides, because in the end we are coming back to government and to the G of the ESG. We were discussing before, maybe according to each one's perspective in the acronym ESG, anyone would want to put the letter in front of the other, whether environmental, social, so it's SEG, ESG, GSE, or whatever we want. But thank you for this very nice and insightful session, as all the sessions we had this first day. And I received a message from, again, Enzo Lefebvre-Servini. He's really sorry he had to go, and also beg your pardon for having taken too much time, but I have also to take my responsibility, because I asked him to set let's say the table also for tomorrow, when we are going to discuss again about digital technologies and digital impact in cultural heritage.